I'm trying to get to this goalpost that little time is spent debating legislation that will positively impact the people that we should be looking out for. Something transformative that will positively impact the lives of the Bahamian people. Last year, during the same period, we were debating legislation to conform to EU and OECD standards and were blacklisted shortly thereafter. We then came back to this honorable chamber at the beginning of the year to chase this goalpost once again. It is like we are the ant and our powerhouses are with their thumbs pressing down when they feel the need for us to conform. Upon reviewing some of this legislation, I came across the OECD website where they have, well, I can't call it an article. There's a book published there called the Global Forum on Transparency and Exchange of Information for Tax Purposes, the Bahamas 2018, and they call it the second round. This book is full of what they say is underlying inefficiencies and continuous recommendations for the Bahamas. The community of the EU who will recommend blacklisting or not meets this month, and I wonder if we will be back here soon repeating the cycle again. In other words, you approve these bills or suffer the consequences. We will just have to wait and see what the results will be. Madam President, while I make this point that we must ensure that legislation brought to this chamber should be modified to fit the Bahamas model, I also understand that these bills is designed to address the demands that the consequences of non-compliance would follow with a blacklisting. Some may say that it may be far worse than any fallout from these bills, but that is debatable. A former minister of the government of the Bahamas made the comment in the Tribune that this will score a false victory if it avoids Europe's latest blacklist, as it represents another step in the slow death of financial services. While the government continued to pat itself on the back for complying with these groups' anti-tax evasion demands, the Bahamas will ultimately have no business because year after year we will be shrinking due to the new regulatory regime forced upon us. I will say that we feel that further amendments were perhaps needed before we get to this point. We have before us today the Register of Beneficial Ownership Bill, the Commercial Entities Substance Requirements Bill, the Removal of Preferential Exemptions Bill, the Penal Code Amendment Bill, the Non-Profit Organizations Bill, and the Business License Amendment Bill. Madam President, other members have so eloquently explained these bills, so I do not intend to be too long, but just to note some points that I feel need to be revisited. The Commercial Entities Substance Bill, as the Minister of Finance pointed out last week, this will require that commercial entities that engage in specific activities to demonstrate that they have real economic substance through having substantial economic presence and real economic activity in the Bahamas. This is designed to address the EU's demand for all nations to impose economic substance regimes that effectively require companies to have a physical presence and do real business in a jurisdiction. I agree with Senator Davis that this may in turn actually benefit the Bahamas. It wants corporate profits, revenues, and assets to be taxed in the jurisdiction where they are generated. This will hopefully prevent companies, especially multinational corporations, from exploiting gaps in tax types, rates, and rules to artificially shift profits from jurisdictions where they are generated to low or no tax jurisdictions, thus lowering their tax bill. Madam President, then there's the Penal Code 2018. I do hope that the government realizes the implications that this has on Bahamians. Let me be clear. I do not support or condone defrauding the government. However, I also feel that a punishment for a crime must also coincide with the seriousness of the offense. $100,000 or 6 months is quite excessive. No one feels that a convicted murderer should only be sentenced 1 year in prison, do they? Or should someone who was caught stealing from the grocery store be sentenced to life in prison? The fact of the matter is that this legislation is too broad when it comes to the defenses of defrauding the government and has no specifics as some can be more severe than the next. What is the plan for this legislation and the complications of how it is poorly drafted? The F&M government seems that they just threw it in with the lot. It doesn't seem much thought really went into this legislation, and as stated before, it just needs to be more specific. The Register of Beneficial Ownership Bill, well, in a nutshell, seeks to provide the competent authority to establish and maintain an electronic database of beneficial ownership details for all corporate and legal entities registered in the Bahamas. It also permits a search of this database by a designated person upon the request of a specified authority listed in the bill. These authorities include the Attorney General's Office, the FIU, and the Financial Services Industry Regulators. The Beneficial Ownership Registry, though, is not accessible to members of the general public. This may be problematic in the future, as this information is extremely sensitive and an electronic registry can be hacked, as we have seen in instances such as WikiLeaks and the Swiss bank account hack. There must be due diligence when creating a platform that houses this information and layered cyber protection if this information will be on service for persons to have access to. We must always be competitive in this regime and at least equal to BVI and Cayman Islands to maintain our competitiveness in the industry. We must preserve confidentiality and guard against data protection risks. It is also important that it is closely monitored and secured. The persons...
Madam President, just a technical point, please.
The point of order, Senator.
Yes, it's really a technical point that the member has either not read the bill or is repeating something someone told him without considering the terms of the bill. There is no centralized government-controlled registry that is created by this bill to be hacked. There's no possibility of hacking it. The information continues to reside behind the firewalls of all of the financial institutions or DNFBPs, designated non-financial businesses or professionals, and financial and corporate services providers who are in the business of accommodating these sorts of IBCs and entities. And their information is behind their firewall. So if there's any hacking, it can only be on a one-one basis on one person's computer. There is no centralized registry being created. So I trust that you'll consider as you continue with your rhetoric, because it obviously is not fact. It's not based on a reading of the bill. No, we're just making the point, okay? And so I hope the honorable member would govern his conduct by what the law actually says and not by what someone told him it says. Thank you.
Madam President, Madam President,
Okay, Senators, we do have a senator on the floor.
I did read the bill, and when it comes to anything electronic, it can be hacked. And I stand by
Madam President,
that it can.
the point must be made.
He has not yielded, though. So please.
The point must be made.
Senator.
He's made it.
Yeah, but he's still on his feet, and you have to tell me your point of order.
My point of order is that the honorable member is making incorrect statements, and when corrected and directed,
Senator,
continues to make the same incorrect assertion. The fact of the matter is, exactly, they can presently be hacked, but anyone that hacks a computer will not be hacking a centralized database with all beneficial ownership information on it. It is this information will continue to reside behind the firewalls on the individual servers and computers of financial services providers. It will not be, the bill can, these computers could be hacked today, but that doesn't change the scenario. We are not creating a centralized registry so that the hacking would reveal the names of every single person who owns every single thing, as occurred in the Paradise Papers and the Panama Papers. There is no central registry to be hacked. Thank you.
Point taken. But computers could be hacked. But I'll move on because I don't. No, I don't intend to labor over this point of what can and cannot be hacked. The Nonprofit Organizations Bill regulates an important sector of the industry. This provides registered nonprofit organizations with rights and privileges, and civil society recognizes the role that play in our communities. The One Eleuthera Foundation has played an instrumental role in helping parts of South Eleuthera, and even recently was part of a group that wanted to purchase and preserve Lighthouse Point in Eleuthera. I noticed that there's a piece in today's Guardian where the Prime Minister indicates campaign finance reform will come before the end of his term. But why delay, one may ask? Wouldn't it be just as easy to make this bill inclusive of what the government has promised? The Prime Minister doesn't have as much time as he may think. The key objectives of this bill should be that the independence of civil society is preserved, the power should be shared, and not concentrated in one institution. The question is this bill workable? With respect to the removal of preferential exceptions bill, I understand the need to comply with the European Union anti-tax evasion avoidance drive that means the Bahamas has to eliminate all such ring fencing, as it's called, or preferential tax regimes for non-resident entities and foreign investors that are not offered to their Bahamian counterparts. However, as suggested by persons in the industry, there may also be difficult legal challenges which may result from eliminating preferential incentives for existing foreign investors by the end of 2021. This also means that all IBCs incorporated from 2002 onwards will not enjoy the 20-year stamp duty waiver their beneficial owners would have anticipated when they formed their companies. One may ask, will these companies that now are able to do business locally be required to follow the same rules as local companies? Will the changes increase costs significantly for accepted companies for other entities that will be caught up in the legislation? Although 120 jurisdictions have signed up for this new standard, many have not, including the United States. This means that companies registered here that wish to remain as a company plaque could re-domicile to a number of American states that do not require any substantive precedent, such as Delaware. Some will say that the Bahamas will adjust, but will it make the Bahamas a more expensive jurisdiction to do business as compared to the competition? One can incorporate and have a holding company in Delaware at a fraction of the cost without any of these regulations. The removal of preferential tax regime legislation proposes may be the most risk to this business.
Senators, there's much too much discussion across the table.
And non-resident entities as a result of this legislation.
Senators, we have someone on the floor.
The business. The F&M government must tread carefully when implementing this legislation. While there are a few amendments when it comes to the Business License Act, the fact of the matter is that this is all about repealing a policy that had been initiated earlier this year. During the budget this year, I spoke strongly against the government initiating a policy where businesses must, with application, provide the government with certified bank statements. I felt then the same way I feel now. It was quite intrusive, and this would have added cost to the cost of doing business in this country, and it would have complicated the ease of doing business. Increasing electricity bills and the increase in VAT has added to the cost of doing business, and this would have been another burden to the small businesses in this country. It needed to be revisited from the day it was implemented. Madam President, the government must be careful that they do not enact a level of change, shock, and disruption at a level to cripple an industry that is already fragile. The F&M government has not addressed this suite of legislation with care and clear messaging to the industry, and having to postpone the vote on the nonprofit legislation proves that this is so. Do not impose more bureaucracy that lessens democracy. It is argued that the EU has created extra layers of bureaucracy while taking away decision-making processes further from local communities. It's impacting a sector that provides a good standard of living with a number of people employed at a high and mid-management level, and what is the Bahamas getting in return? As a country, we must be careful. The policies, decisions, and rules set in place by the European Union are not there to protect the best interests of each individual country. Instead, their goal is to advance the EU as a whole. This has caused many damages in smaller countries that are often left unheard. Does this apply to the Bahamas? We are a small country, but we have survived. This just goes to speak of the resilience and strength of the people. I remain steadfast in my belief that we must always, and I mean always, put Bahamians first when making decisions on their behalf. The people of the Bahamas are watching, and for me, especially the people in Eleuthera. The people in this country are fed up and are looking closely to what the government's next move and what this F&M government will do for the people of this country. Worrying about who will win Junkanoo will not cure the issues that plague this country, or taking cowboy baths will not fix our energy problem. This is serious business, and it takes a serious government to move this country to the next level. Thank you, Madam President, for your time. God bless the Bahamas, and God bless you.
As many. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Jenny Isaacs Dotson.
After lunch. Good afternoon, Madam President and fellow senators. I stand here today to thank the Almighty God for allowing me to open my eyes, to be here today and to be in the month of December. I too wish to express my sincere condolences to the Maynard and Allen family on the loss of their loved ones. With the Almighty God by my side, I stand here today to speak to these 5 bills, which are very significant legislation, which will have an effect on the way organizations in the Bahamas are organized and will be impacted by tax and administrative matters going forward. The 5 bills that we will discuss today are the Commercial Entities Substance Requirements Bill 2018, the Removal of Preferential Exemptions Bill 2018, the Register of Beneficial Ownership Bill 2018, the Non-Profit Organizations Bill 2018, and the Penal Code Amendment Bill 2018. Madam President, these advanced pieces of legislation create innovative guidelines to direct the financial services sector in particular, and to bring them, of course, in line with international standards and domestic law as it relates to substance, same tax treatment, ownership registration, reporting, and fee requirements. Madam President, this new supervisory setting is taking place in a background of quick change, increasing patriotism in G20 countries around the world, and worldwide turmoil in the financial services sector. This came about strangely as a result of globalization, which these same players encouraged when it was to their benefit, with numerous states now trying to restrict the inadvertent importance of the free movement and ability of their population and cash to offshore financial centers for capitalizing and management purposes. The basics of this is that they can now sell us goods less inexpensive than we can make them at home, which will see greater customer requests and capital flows from places like the Bahamas. Globalization was good. As their residents realized that they could manage their own affairs in international centers in a tax-neutral way, and capital ran opposite, globalization in terms of international financial services became bad and had to be stopped as they considered their tax base as being unfairly eroded. This is quite an insincere situation, but it is also a grave reality we have to face. This reality has led to a new set of efforts by the EU and the OECD countries to further tighten international financial and tax transparency standards and cooperation protocols, to further combat tax avoidance and harmful tax practices. Or to put it in simple terms, the movement of capital money from high tax jurisdictions to low tax areas like ours, without the need for true economic substance or physical operations in the offshore financial jurisdiction. Madam President, to be succinct, I will say that the Bahamas has been consistent in maintaining its right to establish domestic law and set its own tax and foreign policy. We have made no concessions based on the principle of sovereignty or our right to be existent as a well-regulated, compliant financial services jurisdiction. We have asserted and have been cooperative to affirm our record of cooperation when it comes to tax matters with our international partners through bilateral cooperation agreements. And we have confirmed our obligation to transparency of standards and international best practices.
Senator, just give me a moment. Senators, we have much too much private conversations going on at this table. Please.
These have worked, though we recognize that there can be better efficiency in the processes. Madam President, therefore, as a small island state, however, we are limited to the influence or force by which the Bahamas is able to maintain its position against these global initiatives. These very initiatives are being organized and presented by the G20 and OECD countries, but also other countries around the world who are all looking to reach equity in the face of the common reporting standards, the automatic exchange of information, and base erosion and profit shifting reality. There will be some that say that the Bahamas has or is not fighting hard enough on these matters. However, this fight has been going on since 2000 and with successive governments who have not been able to stop this change. Therefore, although we debate this matter today, the actions being done are essential based on where we are, and there should be little debate that the actions being taken are essential and necessary to safeguard our prized financial services industry. Further, we must accept that the Bahamas is not the only country that have to adjust its revenue structure and laws to fulfill global standards. Big and small countries worldwide are faced with the same trials. The G20 through the OECD and the EU as a bloc have come together to form these rules with the influence of financial and trade sanctions and penalties that would make it hard for countries to function even outside of the financial services sector if we are blacklisted. Such blacklisting, even without the prospect of penalties, will cause reputational harm that will concern investors, possible and current ones, that can significantly harm our economic stability and growth prospects. These are unsound risks for our young country with our high debt, high unemployment, and inadequate human and physical capacity. Madam President, the new requirements contained within these bills will preserve our position as an important global financial services center and to enhance our value proposal as a leading jurisdiction of choice for the way we do the business of quality wealth management and asset protection services in compliance with these international regulatory standards. Madam President, the Bahamas was asked to address concerns related to jurisdictions facilitating offshore structures or arrangements aimed at attracting profits which do not reflect real economic activity or substantial presence in the Bahamas. and the absence of a corporate income tax or a nominal corporate income tax, which they considered harmful to the global tax system. Also, to address the absence of a searchable beneficial owners registry that would allow authorized designated persons to efficiently produce information on beneficial owners of entities of interest to taxing jurisdictions. I will now turn my attention to the Commercial Entity Substance Requirements Bill 2018. Currently, the Bahamas has two types of corporate structures for businesses: companies incorporated under the Companies Act, which are primarily domestic operating companies, local retailers, construction companies, etc., that have real offices or storefronts and staff in the jurisdiction. And second, companies incorporated under the International Business Companies Act, the IBC. The premier investment vehicle of choice for individual and international, institutional or offshore investors that may or may not have had an office with staff in the Bahamas. Madam President, under the new global requirement, this distinction can no longer exist, and all companies operating from the Bahamas must show substantial economic and operational presence or have their activity reported and taxed in the jurisdiction where the substantial relevant activity is conducted, so that they can be assessed for tax purposes in that jurisdiction. Offices such as the Ministry of Finance, the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs, the Ministry of Financial Services, Trade and Industry, and Immigration, along with industry agents, have taken part in negotiations with the EU and the OECD and looked at reviews of our pertinent domestic and international legislation for most of the year. We have looked at these reviews against new draft legislation to speak to the concerns of the Secretariat of the Code of Conduct Group, Business Taxation, to ensure that we achieve the right balance of business, economic sustainability, viability, and compliance with international standards and best practices. This bill we see today shows the results of this work, which included extensive consultation with industry, international partners, and subject experts. Madam President, this bill will require that commercial entities that participate in specific activities will have to prove that they have real economic substance through having considerable economic presence and real economic activity in the Bahamas. This legislation could really be a positive thing for the Bahamas. The facts are we are not alone in having to implement these measures. Madam President, these organizations must carry out core income generating activities in the Bahamas. The types of business activities covered under the legislation for each relevant category includes banking, insurance, fund management, financing and leasing, headquarters, the taxing of relevant management decisions, incurring expenditures on behalf of group entities, coordinating group activities, shipping, and the distribution or services center. Other ways that income will be made are through intellectual property. Also, there are a number of activities that must be held in the Bahamas, such as meetings of the board of directors. They must have full-time employees of the specific activity and money for operations. Also, companies will be compliant or non-compliant by the authority who will make that decision. If they are non-compliant, those areas where they are will be identified so that they can be rectified. The bill also allows penalties to be levied by the authority, Madam President. The reportable jurisdictions are listed in the second schedule of the bill. In essence, the intent of the Commercial Entity Substance Requirements 2018 bill is to make the activities of an entity commensurate with its presence in the Bahamas. It also follows the guidelines set out in the EU scoping paper and reflects the Secretariat of the Code of Conduct Group business taxation comments and was benchmarked against the Jersey Substance Requirements Bill. The European Union has made monumental demands on the Bahamas and other jurisdictions such as Cayman Islands, Bermuda, British Virgin Islands, Isle of Man, just to name a few. These requests are in addition to international standards set out by the Organization of Economic and Cooperative Development, which the Bahamas has met. The EU has sent a clear message that substance requirements legislation must be passed by the 31st of December 2018. The removal of Preferential Exemptions Bill 2018. Madam President, in addition to the EU's request for entities to have economic presence and substance in the Bahamas, they also expressed concern with respect to tax preferences afforded to non-residents that are not afforded to residents, which they term as ring fencing. Investopedia defines ring fencing as when a regulated public utility business financially separates itself from a parent company that engages in non-regulated business. This is done mainly to protect consumers of essential services such as power, water, and basic telecommunications from financial instability or bankruptcy in the parent company resulting from losses in their open market activities. Ring fencing also keeps customers' information within the public utility business private from the for-profit efforts of the parent company's other business. Generally, these special advantages are in the form of a number of tax exemptions and principally relate to stamp tax and business license fees, which are currently applicable to domestic companies, but exempt for companies with strictly international operations. This means that we will have to do away with these tax exemptions once this bill comes into force. Then we have to remove what the European Union terms as harmful characteristics of the Bahamas tax regime. In the bigger global effort to fight harmful tax practices, ring fencing is being eliminated so that no entity is able to offer an advantage from a tax perspective over another. Further, the exemptions on the IBC in some cases will be removed, and in other cases, there will be a granting to domestic companies some of the advantages previously enjoyed exclusively by IBCs. The total effect of this will be to equalize the two types of companies so that each is able to do what the other can. Companies incorporated after December 31st will benefit from this new policy effective January 1st. Existing companies will be phased in under the transitional clause in the bill, which means they may continue to enjoy the benefit of the preferential tax treatment for 3 years until December 2021, when the advantage will end. Industry partners, agencies, regulatory bodies, and organizations will be consulted and given guidance regarding the same. The Register of Beneficial Ownership Bill 2018. Madam President, this bill, the Register of Beneficial Ownership Bill, allows the capable authority to start a secure search system for the purpose of enabling every registered agent to maintain a database of required particulars on the beneficial ownership of a legal entity for which it has responsibility. This electronic database shall be secure and accessible only by a designated person from a designated secured location within the Bahamas. Subject to search by either the name of an individual or the name of a legal entity, and prevent communication to any person of the fact that a search is being made or has taken place, except where the designated competent authority expressly discloses such information or communication. Madam President, the Register of Beneficial Ownership Bill will deal with the gaps in the current Companies Act as it relates to the maintenance of the beneficial ownership information by corporate and legal entities and the Registrar General. The more prominent sections of the bill are sections 8 to 17, which places a grave responsibility on the registered agent to identify and verify beneficial owners. Section 9 stipulates the particulars of information to be entered on the database with respect to each corporate and legal entity and with respect to each beneficial owner of the corporate or legal entity, to each legal entity that can be registered, and with respect to an exempt person as it relates to the corporate and legal entity. The fourth bill is the Nonprofit Organization Bill, which brings nonprofit organizations under regulatory oversight. And this bill will enhance the honesty of and lessen abuse of these entities. And the AG has already indicated that there will be further consultation done with this bill, which I'm glad to hear, because civil society, of course, had a lot of concerns, and also the church had a lot of concerns in reference to this bill. But this bill will create a registrar of nonprofit organizations and involves all nonprofit organizations in the Bahamas to be registered and to have to provide details of its purposes and objectives. The bill also imposes a strict requirement for them to keep detailed financial statements to demonstrate that the funds have been used in a way that is consistent with the purposes of the nonprofit organization. The overriding purpose of the bill is to provide for regulations to make sure that the NPOs are operating in a transparent manner and are not engaged in activities which constitute an identified risk as defined in the Proceeds of Crime Act, namely activities involving corruption, cyber crimes, human trafficking, money laundering, or financing of terrorism, or proliferation or financing of weapons of mass destruction. Of course, I already spoke about the concerns that civil society have in reference to this bill, and I think other organizations, I'm not sure who will be included or affected by this bill, maybe lodges, fraternities. I'm not sure if unions are captured under this bill, which will be interesting, and maybe the AG can answer that in his wrap-up. The fifth and final bill is the Penal Code Amendment Bill 2018. Why you think out of paper with me? Out of paper with me. The fifth and final bill is the Penal Code Amendment Bill 2018. This bill makes it a crime to deliberately defraud a person employed in the public service relating to the collection of money for the purposes of general revenue. This bill brings tax evasion under criminal acts in the Bahamas and can be considered a landmark one. In making tax evasion an offense within the Bahamas, we are openly removing the idea that the Bahamas encourages tax evasion or protects tax dodgers, and we are countering the stigma associated with us being regarded as a tax haven. In conclusion, Madam Speaker, regrettably, the G20 and OECD countries still see the Bahamas as a tax haven, hiding illicit gained wealth via opaque and complex corporate structures. These bills presented today and the necessary business fee structural changes that it requires is another flaw added in our tax transparency system, which will send a message to the international business community, including the European Union, that the Bahamas is open for legitimate business. Madam President, I know people are asking questions like, how is it that the EU can dictate to the Bahamas? Or why does the Bahamas need to address the EU concerns? Madam President, I will take you back to March of this year, when the European Union Code of Conduct Group Business Taxation, the COCG, issued a list of non-cooperative tax jurisdictions, and the Bahamas was placed on it. As I understand, the EU will be putting pen to paper this month to compile another list of non-cooperative tax jurisdictions, which will be published in January 2019. The Bahamas, like most other countries, are doing their endeavor best to avoid being placed on the so-called blacklist. Madam President, the Bahamas is a sovereign nation capable of making its own laws and regulations. Financial services is our second industry which provides high-level jobs, and this is reflected in the significant 15% contribution to the gross domestic product. The Bahamas is a premier international financial center conducting trade and business with EU member states, its citizens, and other reputable jurisdictions and financial markets. To be placed on a blacklist again would probably result in financial institutions leaving the jurisdiction, causing a loss of jobs, banks implementing de-risking strategies which puts them at risk of losing access to the global financial systems, and the withdrawal of corresponding banking regulations from banks. Madam President, when combined, these actions undermine competitiveness and impede trade, investment, growth, development, and causes serious damage to the Bahamas' reputation. We understand what it takes to remain a well-regulated, compliant, and competitive jurisdiction, and the Bahamas will undertake the requisite steps to maintain its posture and position as a premier blue-chip international financial center. Madam President, I support these bills.
As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Mike Darville.
Thank you so much, Madam President. Madam President, before I get into the substantive aspect of the debate, I would like to take this opportunity to wish you a happy birthday and to say that we hope that you enjoy your day and live to see many more.
That's right.
Madam President, we on this side have read the 5 pieces of legislation: the Commercial Entities Bill, the Register of Beneficial Ownership Bill, the Removal of Preferential Exemption Bill, the Penal Code Bill, and the Nonprofit Organization Bill. We understand exactly what these bills mean to the financial services sector. We realize the pressures on the government from the OECD and the EU to get these legislation through. And for us on this side, we looked at them in consultation with various stakeholders. And at the appropriate time in this debate, our leader on this side will definitely present some key amendments that we believe would help the government as well as industry achieve the goals that is necessary to keep us off the blacklist.
That's right.
Madam President, my understanding of the compendium of bills before us today, called the Financial Services Sector Bill, once passed, would prevent the Bahamas from being blacklisted. We on this side understand the sensitive nature of the bills and the need for the government to ensure that these bills are passed before the 31st of this month in order to meet the country's international obligation. But like civil society and the business community, we on this side have concerns with the way the bills are drafted and the lack of consultation with civil society before being laid in Parliament. The big question is, what is our competitors doing in the region, and how did they address the regulatory issues outlined by the OECD and the EU without being blacklisted? The question is, How were they able to comply and meet the international obligations without over-regulating the jurisdiction? Madam President, we all know that unnecessary regulations reduces the ease of doing business in any jurisdiction. We hear the government has put together a task force because we spoke about the ease of doing business in the island of Grand Bahama and how to capitalize and how to maximize the free trade zone. We heard about the commercial enterprise bills and the ability to attract IBCs from around the world into our jurisdiction to give us the beneficial need for businesses to grow, except when we go on and on. Madam President, a few months ago, our country was blacklisted by the OECD and the EU. Later we learned that this blacklisting was due to some sort of procedural issue and was later rectified. But you know what? It caused damage to the industry. Something simple as that, the industry was rattling. And until it was sorted out, we were able to stabilize the industry and try to put parameters in place for the industry to grow. But a few weeks ago, when these bills were laid in this honorable place, they created more questions than answers in the financial services sector, the business community, among nonprofits, charitable churches, and civil society. It is my understanding with the passing and enactment of these bills, Bahamians will experience radical change in the way we do business with IBCs. Last Saturday, en route to the beautiful island of Grand Bahama, I read an article in one of the dailies where a former governor of the central bank outlined an interesting hypothesis, which stated that the Bahamas escaping blacklisting by the OECD and the EU could mean slow death to the financial services sector, and very soon the country will have to draw the line in the sand, because the truth of the matter is we are getting nothing in return with the implementation of this new regulatory framework dictated to this F&M administration by the OECD and the EU. This new paradigm shift, Madam President, in the way IBCs does business in our jurisdiction will force many to downsize or even leave our jurisdiction and go to other countries who negotiated better packages with the OECD and the EU. It's about negotiation. And the better you negotiate, the better the jurisdiction would look. Madam President, there's no question that the goalpost is changing, and almost daily, these regulatory bodies are demanding more and more and more and more from our jurisdiction with one thing in mind, and that is to shut us down in order to redirect this lucrative business back into their jurisdiction. This is the reality of where we are. Madam President, in the midst of this environment, the financial services sector industry is crying. And the negative feedback that is coming from leaders in the financial services sector, including attorneys, wealth management professionals, local businessmen, concerning the compendium of these bills in front of us today, and they are asking the government to consider these essential amendments that will not sabotage your agenda and not transform the direction we need to go in order for us not to be blacklisted. The truth of the matter is, many in the financial services sector are fed up with how these foreign regulatory bodies execute double standards in different jurisdictions. As a former cabinet minister and one who is familiar with the challenges facing the industry, I agree. We must be careful. Oh, we executed caution. We executed caution. We, in return, consulted the industry. We consulted stakeholders. They advised us. We listened to the advice. And the goalpost was moved. And we listened to the advice again. And the goalpost was moved. And I have a tendency to believe the hypothesis of James Smith that there's going to come a time that we're going to have to draw the line in the sand.
That's right.
But understanding the challenges the government face, we must do all in our power to stay current and use all means to keep us from being blacklisted. Even if we have to use lobbyists in Geneva to assist the government, rather than us moving into the direction believe that we are great negotiators. Most countries around the world use consultants and even lobbyists to help them achieve their goals and objectives while negotiating with these international bodies. But no, the Bahamas, we fly on a plane and send our minister. Whereas places with greater scrutiny, who are more advanced, send the real people who master negotiations. Madam President, over the last few days, I trust the Attorney General myself, and I have a great respect for him. But I would use consultants and lobbyists in these international places to assist the government to achieve its goals and objectives. Madam President, over the last few days, the leadership of our party, in consultation with stakeholders in the industry, had an opportunity to look closely at what the government is proposing with the passing of these bills. While we fully understand the time-sensitive nature to comply, we on this side support our churches, charitable organizations, our non-profit organizations, and the business community who voice their concern with several bills drafted. And the appropriate time, the leaders on the side opposite will be moving some of the key amendments that we believe will assist the financial services sector and the government to achieve its intended mandate. Personally, I don't believe it's the government intention to overregulate our sector, but there is clearly under pressure to comply with the OECD and the EU to prevent our country from being blacklisted. Madam President, we are convinced that the proposed amendments from our side would not affect the government agenda and satisfy the OECD and the EU. A good example, Madam President, is a bill for an act to amend the Penal Code Act, provide for an offense of the intent to defraud the government is geared to government revenue and not IBCs. Madam President, after listening carefully, exactly what it means. It is unnecessary because it has nothing to do with the jurisdiction or what you're trying to do with the OECD. And Senator Davis on our side clearly indicated that in the existing penal code laws, you have the teeth right now to do what you're trying to do.
That's right.
Madam President? No, I'm sure you will repeat it again. Yes. Madam President, after listening carefully to the Minister of Finance contribution in the other place, and listening to our leader, not our leader, the leader on the side opposite early on today, IBCs that once benefited under the Preferential Exemption Act will no longer receive the current benefits. And in Section 4 of the bill, where the government attempts to address any conflicts of the Act, we believe that this particular amendment will not satisfy the regime that is necessary. Madam President, nothing in the piece of legislation speaks about the Hawkesbury Creek Agreement. This point is very important because if we impose taxes on IBCs and non-resident entities, we will certainly lose some of our current IBC business despite the 3-year transition period outlined in the bill. Madam President, Grand Bahama has always been a special legal creature, and as drafted, it is our belief that with the passing and enactment of the Removal Preferential Exemption Bill and the Commercial Entities Bill, international business companies operating in Freeport who are governed under the Hawkesbury Creek Agreement and currently enjoy the benefits of preferential exemption will be seeking legal action concerning these new laws as to whether or not they are applicable to the island, to Freeport. Madam President, many of us in this honorable place believe that the removal of a preferential exemption bill will be challenged by IBCs operating in Freeport who enjoy the concessions offered as a licensee of the Grand Bahama Port Authority. Once again, it appears that the drafters of these bills did not take into consideration the Hawksbill Creek Agreement. And it is our understanding that members of the AG must go and sit with the legal department of the Grand Bahama Port Authority to review the Hawksbill Creek Agreement bylaws and see how the government's agenda could be considered in an operating free trade zone in Freeport. Then, Madam President, there is the Commercial Enterprise Bill recently passed in this honorable place that, according to the government, will aid to attract IBCs from around the world to operate in special economic zones and capitalize on exemptions and benefits under the current Preferential Exemption Act. What would happen to this so-called reformative piece of legislation laid in this honorable place just a few months ago? How would we address this particular commercial enterprise zone bill? And I hope that the leader on the side opposite will be able to clarify some of what I've talked about in his wrap-up. Madam President, since passing these bills in the other place, many serious concerns have arisen. Civil society presented their proposed amendment to the Nonprofit Organization Bill 2018. As drafted, civil society believed that this bill does not reflect measures as it relates to transparency and accountability. Apparently, there was little or no consultation by the government.
Wow.
And if what we are learning is true, a large majority of the nonprofits cannot comply with what the government is proposing, and many would have to cease operation within 90 days of the enactment of this bill or face stiff penalties. Madam President, as drafted, the Nonprofit Organization Bill is overly unfair and punitive and does not seem to reflect the scope and operation of local, not-for-profit sector. Madam President, there is no question that these bills need additional work and further amendments. Like many of my colleagues on our side, I have my concerns with the Nonprofit Organization Bill and do support civil society that as drafted, many nonprofits would be wiped out.
That's right.
And more time is needed to find additional measures in order for the government agenda to move forward. Now, the leader on the side opposite indicated this morning that he intends to hold this bill for further consultation. I think he said for about a week because of the time-sensitive nature of what he has to do. And we hope that he consider our amendments as it relates to the nonprofit bill as well before making a final decision of what the government will do. Madam President, if the nonprofit organizational bill is passed as drafted without the suggested amendment, we on this side will certainly bring this bill back to Parliament to get it right on behalf of the thousands of nonprofit organizations that operate in our country. Finally, Madam President, under the Hawksbill Creek Agreement, IBCs operating in Freeport are very concerned about the removal of preferential exemption bill and the commercial entities bill, and once enacted, both pieces of legislation will be challenged. I'm telling you what you have to do. You have to go to the Grand Bahama Port Authority and sit with them. No, because the Hawksbill Creek Agreement.
You're talking to the chair.
I'm sorry. Sorry, Madam President. Madam President, like civil society, we on this side have many concerns with the compendium of bills. And at the appropriate time, in this debate, our leader on this side will lay some amendments we believe will help the government achieve its mandate while addressing some of the deep concerns coming from the business community the financial services sector, and nonprofit organizations and civil society. Madam President, we believe that the Penal Code Bill, as is sufficient to address the government's concern, and we do not support the proposed amendment, and we're also asking the government to look at the proposed amendment with the intent to remove it so that we on this side could feel comfortable and support the government agenda. With those few words, Madam President, I rest my case.
As many, Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Renard Henfield.
Good afternoon, Madam President and Senate colleagues. Good afternoon, Bahamas. God is good, and all the time God is good, Madam President. There are 3 consultative senators appointed by this F&M government. That's 3 perspectives the government has invited to the table. And today I have to pause and commend the Attorney General and Leader of Government Business in the Senate for listening to the plea of civil society Bahamas and for always being willing to consult with and work with civil society sector as much as is practicable. And I was taken aback or shocked to hear Senator Sweeting and Senator Davos speak in support of civil society. You know, I was shocked today to hear them. The young people would say, I see what you did there. I see what you did there. You know, Madam President, today, the AG and by extension the government has, today, the AG and by extension the government has demonstrated transformative leadership as it listens to the people it leads. I can't say the same for the last administration. Because I was present in civil society from 2015 as we were agitating for the government of the day to listen to civil society. Nothing happened for us. Nothing happened for us. And this government now comes today and is listening and is willing to consult, and I commend the AG again and the government for that. You see, Madam President, many of us had come today prepared to provide contributions with respect to that nonprofit bill. And for me, being a part of civil society and being in the Senate to raise civil society's concerns, you know, I've had an appreciation for what civil society and nonprofits do in this country, as all of us do in both houses. We know that the government cannot do everything. And there are voids that civil society and nonprofit organizations fill. The government cannot feed every hungry mouth in this country. And there are nonprofits or civil society organizations raising donations every week to do so. And I think we all can think of Bishop Hanschel and what the Great Commission does. Right. There are organizations like FOAM that goes out every day someone is murdered and counsels that family, the young men, the brothers, the uncles, the cousins, etc. Every day they go out and they counsel people who've lost someone tragically, not just to counsel them and offer some advice, but to ensure that these young men in our country don't turn into vigilantes and seek revenge. You know, there are so many nonprofit and civil society organizations, Madam President, that have opened community centers to watch over children as their parents work, to provide a meal, to provide tutoring after-school programs. And there are so many nonprofit and civil society organizations that kick in to provide hurricane relief at a moment's notice. So while we all appreciate that the government can't do everything every day all the time, there are many nonprofit organizations and civil society organizations that assist. But I take the Attorney General's point that there are in everything, as it is in our profession as attorneys, there are some bad apples in everything. And there are some that do not comply. And there are some that are doing a yeoman's job complying. So civil society does not stand today or offer amendments saying it does not want any regulation. Civil society is simply saying to the government that while we welcome regulation, we have some suggestions. And I welcome again and thank the Attorney General for taking the opportunity to consult with civil society organizations. Madam President, I wish to speak very briefly to the Penal Code Amendment Bill. The Bahamas, Madam President, is not short of laws. We have a law for just about everything. We have a law for bicycles being licensed, yet there are bicycles cutting in and out traffic every single day. We have a law for the dogs, and yet every day there are stray dogs roaming neighborhoods, and, you know, we have a law for profanity in public places, but yet every day people are out and persons are cussing people underneath their skirt. We have road traffic laws, yet every day there are persons running the traffic lights every hour. The problem in this country is not that we don't have laws. The problem in this country is we don't have enough enforcement of our laws. I've been at the airport and observed people over the years who think they've arrived, not just from abroad, but they think they've arrived, and I've watched them waltz out of the customs hall, never opening their bags. I've seen persons who pastor certain churches waltz out of the airport customs hall, not paying any duty. And the problem again is that we have a law that when you come, you should pay your duty. The problem is enforcement. So I welcome the Penal Code Amendment, Madam President, and I say to our people, for too long we have traveled, we've come home, and we have hid receipts and refused to pay our fair share of duty and taxes, etc., to keep the lights on this country, to keep the hospitals and schools going, the police stations going. And when we deprive the government of those funds, it is now officially on record crime if you were to deceive a public official in the collection of general revenue. Madam President, again, my concern is not that the Bahamas doesn't have enough laws, but that we don't have enough enforcement of our laws. So I await the fair enforcement across the board for all, and not just the poor. Because for some reason, Madam President, the poor get caught and march to court more than the affluent. So I welcome again the enforcement across the board for all, and I will support this bill. I will be just as brief on the Register of Beneficial Ownership bill, Madam President. About a year ago, I became privy to this movement to reveal the identity of persons behind companies, the beneficial owners. I remember following Transparency International's articles online as they celebrated one victory after the other as countries passed the relevant legislation around the world. And I cringed at the thought of everyone in the public knowing that any one of my clients owned XYZ group of companies. And as the whole of a financial service provider's license, I felt that it would put the lives of business persons at risk. You see, many companies are formed with unrelated names so that people don't know that Jane Doe is the owner of XYZ group of companies, which may make Jane Doe a target of crime. So, Madam President, I followed news articles on the countries discussing the Register of Beneficial Ownership quite closely. At one point, I recall when the Cayman Islands and Bermuda were standing up and appeared to be ready to resist. And I was all excited, December up to about March, April this year, and then they folded. And they fell right in line. And they folded because the UK, the European Union, etc., would have come down hard on these jurisdictions with sanctions. And the truth is, Madam President, that good governments seek to shield their economies from disruption. Good governments seek to shield their economies from disruption. And they ensure that their people and economies live to fight another day. I recall when I attended Our Lady's Primary School and even St. Augustine's College, Madam President, whenever a bully would come around, I could always run to my cousin for some protection. But the Bahamas doesn't have anybody to run to for assistance or protection. The Bahamas has no big brother to run to and say, they're forcing this down our throat. US, UK, Canada, none of them can come to our aid. In fact, these very same countries are the ones, a part of the bloc, telling us, do you need to do these things? So with that in mind, we as a country must develop a strategic national plan to ensure that someday we can stand up straight with our children and future generations at our side or behind us and say, that's enough. Don't touch that goalpost. We will not play fetch any longer. Now, as Senator Dowell acknowledged, these laws were dictated to the FNM by the OECD and European Union. Had the PLP government been the government of the day, they would have received the very same directives this government is receiving today. And while I am no fan of the ever-shifting goalposts, as all of us in this place of the same view, it is clearly obvious today that none of us are. Yet none of us wants to see the Bahamas blacklisted. So in preparing my contributions today, Madam President, I was reminded of the conversation with the wise old man a few weeks ago who said it's better to be informed than opinionated. So I researched Transparency International's agenda. I researched the anti-money laundering directives, the G20 member countries' agenda, small and developing nation responses to these directives being pushed on us. And I realized, Madam President, that to fight corruption, tax evasion, terror financing, and money laundering in our countries, we need to be able to trace the money. Colloquially, we say we want to follow the paper. To follow the big money, we need to know who owns the companies that get the multi-million-dollar contracts, despite the fact that they've never built a school or not even a chicken coop. So we can understand why the beneficial owner that gets a $10 million contract the year of the elections is turning around and donating $5 million to a political party. That's corruption, if you ask me. So, Madam President, the UK and its territories have gone so far as to make their registers public. The Bahamas will not see its register of beneficial owners as a publicly searchable database. And there are pros and cons to that. But, Madam President, as I begin to wrap up, I commend the AG. It's December 10th. It's the Christmas season. It's Advent. And Advent is a season of waiting and preparation. So if the AG is minded to allow us all to return to our families after today and come back in January, I'm sure we'll all be grateful. You know, we'd be grateful, Mr. AG. There's no need to rush back in next week to address the non-profit bill. We can deal with that first thing in January. First thing in January. So, Madam President, as I close, I ask our Heavenly Father to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and the various non-profit or civil society organizations as we all seek to bring relief to the Bahamian people in this ever-changing world. I support the 4 bills now on the House floor, on the floor of the Senate, and I commend the government and the AG again for its decision today. I thank you, Madam President.
As many, Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Fred Mitchell.
Live streaming, web thought, webinar, podcast, you name it, is up and running. I see. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, Madam President. Yeah, just a few notes. The Attorney General, when he was speaking, talked about France and what's happening in France. And I, too, was really fascinated by what's happening in France. And as I examine these things, the French are really quite up in the OECD. I believe that they are, if you were to put your finger on any country that's a progenitor of this horrible process that we're being put through, you'd say it's France that's responsible for it. And so when I saw the revolt going on in the streets in Paris, I said, well, that's obviously the language they understand, because the French president has climbed down. As you know, today he's announced tax concessions, and he wants to have a dialogue now, and so on and so forth. The more serious point I'm making is that you asked, and everybody asked, what can this little country do when people are threatening you in the way they are? They've made life incredibly complicated for us because it doesn't affect not the international sector alone. It has affected everyone here who's got to go in and get a bank account here. People are sick and tired of this crap, if I can use that expression, of you've known me, okay, I withdraw it, for this garbage. Where? You go, you have to go into a bank. They've known you all your life. And you must bring your, I don't know what you must bring in order to identify yourself every year. You know me, you've always known me. People in the small society are just fed up with that stuff. And that's just like the thin edge of the wedge. That's really what you are, the pushback since this thing went through Parliament. That's what you're getting. And the Progressive Liberal Party, having taken the temperature of that, says that somehow that has to be represented in here. And that's what you hear coming from us. That there's this pushback. There's people are just angry at this. That here we go again. And James Smith said it in a more formal way, that it's a Pyrrhic victory because we know that the goalposts are not going to stay there. These people are intent on destroying this sector.
Yes, we agree.
They're intent on that. So you're taking some measures now to save it, but people are saying, when is the line going to be drawn in the sand? And so sometimes, the more serious point again is sometimes you just got to play crazy. Sorry, say we ain't gonna do it. We ain't gonna do it. And, you know, as I say, the people of France have told the French president, I don't care what you say. We are going no farther with this. And so that's what you're getting back from the country. One of the preachers, ministers of religion more properly, who has a concern about this, wrote the press this morning, and I wondered what their concerns are. He cast it in more sophisticated terms by saying that this was a constitutional issue, that what you propose in the nonprofit bill will in effect be an attempt to truncate the right to choose your religion and to practice your religion. Well, I'm only telling you. I'm only telling you. I'm only telling. You see, and we can live, you know, being in cabinet. No, yeah, but being in cabinet is a wonderful place to be. You know, you can sit in there in this nice bubble, and you know, you say, oh, that don't matter. That don't matter. As one criticism comes after, that don't matter. That don't matter.
Like when y'all say y'all didn't mind no referendum.
No,
It didn't matter.
no. But I'm only one. I'm giving you the benefit of the experience. But you know. Well, so I'm warning you. I'm warning you. Now, so I just want to start off there, and then I wonder, you know, and you can say this, whether the government has actually, you know, we trot out this stuff every time we speak to these issues about the financial services sector is the second largest contributor to the GDP and how many jobs it contributes and so on and so forth. Well, I keep asking myself, how many jobs does it in fact? How many jobs? Yeah, okay, so we need to be told how many jobs does it in fact contribute to this economy? What is its contribution to the GDP? And is it the 15%? Is it the 15%? And the reason I say that is because, you know, at one point, to use agriculture as an example, St. Kitts and Nevis and all those countries, St. Lucia, you know, was in the banana business, and St. Kitts and sugar, and it came to the point where these people, same people, the United States and the Europeans, ripped the heart out of it. And so they had to make a decision to get out. Bill Clinton, when he came here, told us one of the worst decisions he thought he made was that decision to sabotage, which ended up sabotaging the agricultural industry in the Caribbean by siding with the Latin Americans. And everybody cries these tears after the deed is done. And these people are arguing this great morality that they're arguing now, that we are somehow taking their tax money and so on and so forth. This is rubbish, is absolute rubbish, because all of the money that comes here as a result of these programs ends up right back in those developed countries. And we saw that with the former Prime Minister of Britain. David Cameron, who ended up, his dad put some money here, and the money, when he liquidated it, the money went back to Britain. It didn't stay here. It was a way of growing capital. So it is a fallacy that they're arguing. And these are the same people, my colleague said it down below in the House, the same people, you know, who invented slavery and, you know, now want to come and preach ethics and morality and so on and so forth. You know, not so long ago, they were saying that competition in trade was a great thing. You know? Competition in trade was a great thing. And I thought part of the reason trade was a great thing was because you could price your product at a level which was competitive with the next. So we, as a jurisdiction, decided that we're going to price the taxes at a level which was competitive with the next. The Irish do it right now in the EU. But now suddenly that's all bad. That's stealing their money from them and stealing their taxes. Unbelievable. If you don't, you know, the Attorney General said, well, we are where we are. I suppose we are. And then, yeah, I can keep talking, all right. I'm talking to those folk outside. And to the President, of course, Madam President. You know. But I also want to remind the leaders of the government of this. A couple stories. You know, there's a real hostility to my continued presence in the former constituency that I used to represent. My office is still there. So, yeah, for the party. So, I try to be sure whatever our people do there, that every I is dotted, every T is crossed. So we wanted to use the park for a function on Friday. So I said, now, you know how these things go. Make sure how these go. Make sure you get permission to use that park. Make sure you get. So dutifully went along, found out who the authority is, went and applied to use the park, only to be told, oh no, it can't be done like that. First, there's a form you have to fill out. Then you have to write a letter. Then you have to get someone with a police record. Police record. Okay. Withdraw. Go to the police station, order the police record. That takes 48 hours. 48 hours, showed up again, police record not ready, come back the next day. So we're now into day 3. After that, you get the police record, you do that part only to find out, well, we aren't the only ones who give permission, you have to go to the police. So off to the police commissioner we go, only to be told, no, it doesn't work that way. You have to write another letter to the commissioner of police explaining what you need the park for, so on and so forth. All of this, of course, runs us right into the day when the function is going to take place, which is why you usually just go in the park and use the park in the first place. But when they went to try and press the issue, we were told, oh, the commissioner of police is out of town and no one is here to give the permission, so sorry, we can't do it. Well, you know, I'm only saying. Now, and there's a point to this story, is about the bureaucracy. The bureaucracy. I spoke to the Attorney General because the Progressive Liberal Party wants to incorporate. We want to separate the assets of the trustees and their personal liability into a corporate structure. And we want to also vest the properties in this corporation, not in trustees personally, which was the model of an unincorporated association back in the 1950s, and we want to put our intellectual property rights in this corporation. We had this situation in the last election where people using the logo unlicensed, and there wasn't a thing we could do about it. Now, the lawyers have told us that this has been before the registrar's office 4 months.
I see nothing. I haven't seen anything.
Well, that is my point again. That's my point again. That's my point again. So I make 2 examples of the layers of bureaucracy in our country, and I cannot understand why things cannot move as a matter of routine. Just tell me within a week whether or not I can get it or I can't get it. And now we are passing all of this legislation, making promises not only to the local domestic theater, but to the international community that we are going to act in a certain way. Piling up additional responsibilities on the Ministry of Finance, the Minister of Finance, and the Attorney General's office. And I can tell you, God help you if you try to get anything out of the Ministry of Finance. Yes.
Or rip.
So, in the exchange which took place across the floor, I asked the Attorney General, what is the mischief that all of this is designed to cure? And will this legislation, this process that we're going through, actually cure that mischief? Now, we are told that the reason we are doing this is because international best practices. I love that expression. International best practices. So it makes that, you know, the country is up and modern and so on and so forth. And these international best practices are going to get at terrorism. It's going to get at all the nefarious activities that people use money for and so on and so forth. That's what this is designed to cure. Well, you know, I'll go back to the 9/11 experience that took place. See all this stuff that we now do at the public airports? Take off your shoes, take off your belt, take off your jacket, take off this, strip search, and all the rest of it. Right. See all of that? That was put in place, they said, because it was going to add a level of security when we. Now, it makes us feel better. Oh, great, you know, we're safe because, you know, the TSA and whoever it is searching our bags and so on and so forth. I met some grumpy fellow going through the British airports who started to lecture me on why didn't I take my liquids out and put them in a plastic bag before I went through, you know, and I wanted to, you know, but I didn't. You know, you're in the hands of the lions. I got to keep them, right? But not after this lecture. So, of course, they had this little thing in the airports which says, can you describe the quality of your experience going through the British airport? They have a red button and a green button, and I smashed the red button. But this is what we have to put up with. Now, the more serious point is this. If you remember, the people who they said caused the 9/11 crash into the towers, the people who caused that, were actually stopped in Boston as they were going, frisked, and all the rest of it, and they got through the system, and they did it. So you have to ask yourself, logically, what level of security has actually been added by what we're doing now? Except to make us feel safer. Right, they went through, they were stopped. You have the pictures of them being actually patted down as they went through. And they still did what they did. So, there's an article which is circulating now this morning with regard to this and money laundering going through London. And they're saying that all of this stuff that the British and the Europeans have done had done nothing. Nothing. Nothing to stop the things, the mischief which they say they are trying to cure. Nothing. And yet, we keep marching down this road of making our lives more complicated and more difficult. And no one will stop and say what Shakespeare said. The law is an ass with respect to this. You know, they keep, it is just, Madam President, it is simply inexplicable, and people are angry about this. This is what is reflected in what we say. So, at some point, we, as a government in the previous incarnation, went to the United Nations and suggested that instead of this piecemeal approach with regard to this, that we ought to have one umbrella treaty where there's a level playing field. Well, obviously, the G20 controls what happens there, so that was quickly turned off. We were actually hoping that with the coming of a Republican administration in the United States, where they have less interest in this kind of thing and understand, because many of them have offshore accounts, then maybe that would have brought some change in the direction of this situation where people are being forced into these strictures which we now have. The moral question, though, for us is this, Madam President. Every time our small countries find some mechanism to make some money, and it's very difficult for a small country to find space to make some money. You were, I was reminded when you were speaking, Mr. Attorney, I was reminded of the Honorable Arthur Hanna, who in representing us as Governor General was accepting the credentials of the South Korean ambassador. And he said, Mr. Ambassador, you know, South Korea and the Bahamas have something in common. We are nestled next to giants, and we're only as independent as the giants allow. I never forgot that. And I've always argued that notwithstanding that, we do have the space to make our way. But it appears that more and more that people are deliberately, I mean, we are almost getting to the point where the United States is not using those strictures against us, but to the point where it's like the U.S. dealing with Cuba. Like you're hemmed in on every side, threatened with the correspondent relationship. The other day when I was in the UK, some statement came out from the British government, Madam President, that banks were supposed to look at transactions coming from the Bahamas with a greater degree of scrutiny. That's what I'm saying. I mean, this is ridiculous. And all that is going to do, Madam President, is interfere with our kids trying to get an education in Britain, for their parents trying to transfer money over there. All kinds of trouble just to do that because of this rubbish. And they are the ones who created these societies. They've got a convenient amnesia now about their responsibility for it. All of our kids, for example, have to go away to school because, you know, you can't, we do not have the ability to educate at a tertiary level all of the kids here. So they all have to go away to university. And the complications from the time I went to university in 1970 to what you have to do to go to university, I mean, it is ridiculous. At the same time that people are arguing for globalism and we must all trade with one another, right? You're making it almost impossible for people to leave their countries to go to another country to get an education. And here is the even more problematic issue about it, is that Joe Biden says to us at a meeting down in Trinidad, prime ministers of the Caribbean are complaining that all of the people coming out of our universities are being taken by the United States and developed countries. And he says, oh, well, you know, I don't apologize for that because the United States wants the brightest and the best, and as long as you produce them, you can take them. That's fine. I understand. That's fine in a competitive world, except that it takes so much of our tax dollars to educate our children, and they end up staying in those societies after spending our tax dollars. So the kids who go to R.M. Bailey and S.C. McPherson and L.W. Young and Doris Johnson end up getting their education from the taxpayers of the Bahamas, but end up staying in the United States. And when you ask the United States for any assistance on that, they can't do it. Oh, education is not a federal matter. It's a local matter. Well, you know, my life has told me you do what you want to do. Anything you want to do, you want to do. And if you want to make a way, you will make a way possible. So I say to these Europeans who are making life so difficult for us now, is that you talk about that morality. What about this morality? And the fact that our countries are trying to make a way for themselves, and every time we try to make a way for ourselves, you come with this false moral argument and cutting us off at the pass. So at some point, I use the example of the French in the streets. At some point, the Caribbean countries are going to have to do that, going to stand up, have to do it, because our backs will be against the wall. And I've heard the intellectuals in Jamaica complain that they are so concerned about the level of criminality even amongst their so-called ordinary businessmen and elites, because there's no other way to make a space for you to go forward. That's what is at the heart of this. And our contributions, such as they will be, in the stage of the committee stage of the bill, will be seeking to help the government draw that line. Modest suggestions that if someone has a right, it shouldn't be taken away from them until that right expires. That's a modest thing.
Yeah.
That if you, on the revenue side, that you don't charge people unless you've exhausted every avenue of trying to get from ordinary means or administrative means the monies which are owed to the government. So that's really, and with regard to nonprofit organizations, to make sure that political parties and the church are out of this net. To make sure political parties and the church are out of this net. Leave them out of the net. Well, I hear what you say, Attorney General, but the press called me and said when they looked at the definition, they thought that it included political parties. So I only say some, different, they're not attorneys or lawyers or judges. But anyway, if you say so, you can provide that assurance. So those are the directions we want to go. I've been talking about bureaucracy, and I wish this is slightly off topic, but you know what my concern is in Grand Bahama. And I sent someone down today I sent someone down to the docks today to find out whether, because I told them that you said across the table the issue has been resolved. Now I'm told it may have been in a way, but, well, exactly, this is what I'm saying. Instead of just abolishing the silly rule, now it's something new. I'm told you can bring in 200 pounds of meat, but it can't be 200 pounds of chicken. There's only 50 pounds of chicken, 50 pounds of pork, 50 pounds of beef, and 50 pounds of mutton. And then after that, you got to get a license in order to, what is this? This is just utterly ridiculous. People, that's what I'm saying. People, this Christmas time, the women, you and your sisters and your neighbors get together and go to Miami, and you buy a stack of meat, and you bring it to the thing. And I'm told, I didn't see for myself, ZNS actually put on TV, they confiscated the woman's meat for some fundraiser that was supposed to be taking place in Freeport. And they actually showed the turkey in the dump. A good, it reminded me of the days of Michael Manley in Jamaica, where, customs confiscates the turkey and the ham because the rule says you can't bring it in, trying to seize the commanding heights of the economy, so you can't import ham and turkey. And of course, the ham and turkey doesn't end up confiscated, it ends up in some customs officer's house.
Go ahead.
That's what I'm saying. This is ridiculous. And the thing is, it's not. No, I do, but to an extent. But I'm not criticizing them. But what I'm saying is this. It's not as if we're trying to grandstand on this particular point. Because I wrote the Attorney General as soon as the matter came to my attention. I said, look, before this becomes a public issue, get to the authorities and deal with it. No, I understand, but I'm only telling you, right? This is what you're dealing with, It's just, and you got five members of parliament in Grand Bahama, so I don't understand what causes it to be unresolved at this point.
For us to come here.
So, in summary then, that is, as the Attorney General said, where we are. I've given our rationale for what we do. I've tried to present as best we can the resentment which exists that is palpable in the country over this. And I don't think it needs to get to the point of the yellow jackets in the street. But at some point, the public is saying there must be a line in the sand. We must draw that line. And that line, all of us, both sides, want to have a sovereign country within the space which is allowed through the diktats of the real politic of the world, the real politic. You know, you objected to our use of the words of the diktats of the bureaucracy in Brussels. But you see, I've been this route before. When I was in this place before, we suspended one afternoon at 4 o'clock and told, don't leave the precincts of the Senate because we're busy drafting the legislation, and the fellows were on the phone to the OECD, change this word, put this comma here, this letter here. Then we were reconvened and duly took out our rubber stamps and, yes, sir, boss. That's why we're saying what we're saying. So we've been here before. Been here before.
Email it to you.
Yes.
As a good.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm saying what you need to do is to change your email address. Let it bounce back. So we will be offering certain amendments in the committee stage, and those are the comments that I have to make. Thank you. Thank you. That's it, Madam President. Thank you. Right.
As many,
Madam President?
Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Carl Bethel.
Thank you. Let me once again commend senators on the quality of their presentations, particularly on our side, where we always do such a splendid job, but also members opposite. Let me say that in speaking of the palpable anger that the leader opposite spoke to, yeah, I know, I have palpable anger every day I deal with this, okay, quite frankly.
You can say the word.
No,
Sugar, honey, iced tea.
I am as passionate a Bahamian, and I know my colleagues are as passionate Bahamians as you are. And the same things that you point to, the same concerns, the same anger, the same feeling of, you know, when will this ever end? We all feel. But some have to govern, and some have to oppose. And that's the difference. Because, you know, not more than a few years ago, the shoe was on the other foot. And all of that passion, all of that visceral anger over what was going on was there as well when the former government, the PLP government, got the word. The United States didn't even bother calling you for a meeting. They passed a bill, FATCA, Foreign Accounts Tax Compliance Act, and told you it applies to you, even though you're not a state of the United States. They told every country in the world it applies to them. And in one fell legislative swoop of extraterritorial legislation, the United States became the world's parliament. Not the way that the British, when they get ready, you know, didn't like what our little colonial House of Assembly would say or do, they'd go back to London and pass what they'd call an imperial bill. They would convene the same English elected parliament, but they would say, today we are not the British parliament, today we are the imperial parliament, and pass a law and say this applies to the Bahamas and every other little rebellious little territory anywhere, and call it an imperial bill, the imperial parliament. Well, America, without declaring an empire or doing anything, just pass a law and say the whole world must comply. And what did the Bahamas do? Complied. Then the British came, the Europeans came along. This was last government now. This was under the PLP. I was sitting right, sir, where you're sitting. When they came along with the automatic exchange of information, the compliance with taxation information, all of these tax compliance acts and bills necessary for the Bahamas government to fully comply with the CRS of the European Union, the Common Reporting Standards. Okay? And there was no back and forward. This is the bill, pass it. Pass it. And so I sat right there, but you see, we'd been through this before. We'd been through this in 2000. So when the shoe, you know, and during the 2000 episode, the members opposite, in their other incarnation, in that other place, yeah, of course he surrenders. I'll talk about France in a minute. France is an interesting country. But the PLP in that other place accused us of treachery, all sorts of things, being nothing but the stooges of foreign, of Brussels and the FATF in Paris. The official PLP on the floor of that house. Yes, yes. And they promised to repeal every last one of the laws we passed in 2000. But they came to office. See, governance is different from opposition. I saw a cartoon recently showing, at that time, the late Charlie Maynard, an image of him, and of the late Bradley Roberts, where it was the sideburns, because he's on vacation now, so they're recycling them. And Charlie is sort of saying, y'all ain't do this, and you ain't do that, and you ain't do this. And then there's a little bubble thing over Bradley head and say, boy, this job, because they were both former chairman. One was the chairman of a governing party, and by then, the other was the chairman of the opposition. Charlie was chairman of the opposition party. And then Bradley said, boy, this job is a lot easier when you're in opposition. It's a lot easier when you're in opposition. But I want to assure you that even though we had gotten called all manner of things in 2000, and we lost the government, I think, because of anger over the bills in 2000. I think it was a major reason we lost the government. And the government that beat us, of the first Perry Christie government, said how they're going to repeal everything, didn't change it, not a whit, not a jot, not a tittle. Nothing. Changed nothing. And bragged that the Bahamas is now a blue chip international financial services destination. When the shoe fell on your foot, I was right in this place. CRS was passed. We didn't get up and carry on. We acknowledge that this is something that had to be done for the Bahamas to live up to its responsibilities to the global community. The United States had passed a law. Everybody had to comply, or else the U.S. would sanction you. And where do we get 90% of our tourists? 100% of our food imports, all of our oil imports. We couldn't draw a line in the sand against the U.S. All of Europe can't enforce its standards that they're enforcing on us against the United States. The whole of the G20 can't enforce against the United States. So when the government came, we didn't kick off and carry on. We supported what the government did because we knew it had to be done. When the CRS came, exactly the same scenario. Well, you know, at the end of the day, what did happen downstairs in the other place was an acknowledgement that governments have to govern, and you have to do what's in the best interest of the country as you see it. And that acknowledgement is where we are today. The example of France. France is a most interesting country. Every 50 years or so, I think they're in the 5th or 6th republic now. Every 50 or 60 years or so, they just tear it up, you know. They just go in the streets and just basically say, we're tired of this particular arrangement, and we're going to riot until it's gone. And they have had like 5 republics, meaning that whole constitutions that govern their political ordering were basically torn up and started again with another version of the republic system of government. The last republic was reconstituted by Charles de Gaulle after uncontrolled riots throughout the length and breadth of France. De Gaulle was in retirement because the establishment got rid of him when he was first president. He was in retirement. They called him back. Called him back to save the republic. And then you got the present Republican Constitution. And every so often they'll rip it up. But, you know, that's the internal ordering of the French Republic. The question now is, where is there a line in the sand for us? Well, we have to think strategically. Now, for me, there is a line in the sand. The line in the sand is where there are no indefensibles. Right now, if you look at the question of anti-money laundering mechanisms, there were clear weaknesses identified. If you look at the whole question of the global standards that are being imposed or evolving, there is a line in the sand. There's two lines for me. One is, if I can see that any criticism of the way in which we do business in terms of anti-money laundering mechanisms, counter-financing of terrorism, anti-proliferation, if such criticisms as remain are plainly based on ulterior motives, plainly based on ill will, plainly based on malice, and not based in fact that is transparent, discernible, and provable, that's a line in the sand for me. Because then you are not seeking to improve or assist me in improving anything. You are seeking to destroy me. The second line in the sand with all of these standards that are being imposed, if you will, now by the Europeans is very simple. When it reaches the point that they are basically saying to the Bahamas, as they said over the sugar issue, the banana industry. See, that banana industry was based entirely upon preferential access into Europe. Without preferential access, there never would have been a sustainable banana industry. Bananas would grow throughout the Caribbean. But they became a commercial entity, a commercial product because of preferential access, which then made it economically viable to mass produce more bananas than could be consumed by the populace in order to fill market demand in other countries. And Bill Clinton and the likes were busy using the pretext that somehow people preferred bigger, more sugary, less vitamin intensive Chiquita bananas. Chiquita company to their political entities, no question of that. Okay, but that's where we are, okay? The world, if the world's impositions on the country are such that it's clear that these are motivated by ulterior motives, that these are not standards that are being evenly applied, and you gotta kind of in your head put the U.S. off you can't even consider that, because if you compare what the world is demanding of everybody else and what they demand of the U.S., there's no comparison. And it is clear that every single thing that we are told is wrong, bad, terrible about the way we're doing business, tax competition, and all of the likes is being vigorously pursued in at least 4 states in the United States and several of their territories. And the world can't say boo to the Americans. But that's the world we live in. And putting aside the United States of America, the rest of the world is being asked to comply with these same standards. So my posture is this, is when you tell a small black country like me that I am part of, that I am helping to be a part of the government of, that we don't have the right to be in this business, that's when you get my line in the sand. Because you've gone beyond saying there's a standard and we're going to help you attain that standard, and it's a standard that applies to everybody else. Then it's become, they're the boss, they control the financials, and you don't have the right to exist. That's the line in the sand to me. But as long as people can lodge a legitimate criticism about the way in which we do business and its deficiencies, I will try to address the deficiencies. Because at the end of the day, I know that the Bahamian people and Bahamian financial services providers can attain the highest standards. And when they do so, can do so competitively. And can do so in a way that will preserve the business and grow it. I'm satisfied of that. I have no doubt in my mind. But when you tell me I don't have the right to exist, that's a different issue. That's my line in the sand. And I'm sure that that will ultimately be all of our line in the sand. Now, on the question of these, other comments that were made, I love my cousin there, Dr. Darville. He said that the bills were dictated by the OEC and the EU. No, the terms are not dictated because they're different in different countries. The provisions. It all depends on the way in which you cast your laws. So there are no dictated terms. They set their standards out in their scoping papers and their notes as to what the evils that they seek to eliminate are. How you address them is a matter of your drafting when compared to their scoping notes and guidance notes, etc. So it's not quite what would be in your mind that, oh my God, they're dictating chapter and verse. No, there is, as I said, a back and forward on this issue. And there are some issues where even under this heavy fire, we felt that some issues were so fundamental and being so overly stated and, in a sense, overreached by the Europeans that we have said no, no, no on some of these issues. I don't need to go into them, but they're issues that clearly didn't match. What they demanded didn't match the scoping notes. We have in fact hired a number of consultants, and we are in the process of finalizing relations with a legal firm. It's Hogan & Lovells, but they have an office in Brussels, and they have a division specifically committed to anti-money laundering and the FATF work, as well as tax advice. And it's staffed largely with former federal U.S. prosecutors, Canadian prosecutors, and from prosecutors from the Serious Fraud Office in the United Kingdom. So these are persons who've been working in the bowels of law enforcement and prosecutions, to whom we are turning for advice, and who also have physical offices well established in Brussels, in Paris, London. And Washington, D.C., because that's where the core of the firm does its business. And they have been excellent lobbyists on behalf of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas through several governments. And I think anyone who has dealt with them would be satisfied with the quality of their representation. But we have had advice not only from them, but from other entities that we have consulted and other persons. And the universal advice that we have received is quite simply this: comply. Comply, get off of the blacklist, get off of the gray list, get off of the compliance list. Don't put yourself in the position where the Europeans can, with any kind of credibility, blacklist you. The blacklisting that my friend, family Senator Darville referred to, that occurred earlier in 2017. SIP say that one of the leader in Europe had indicated something was going to come down on the Bahamas. At the end result, what happened is we are told that this is after the blacklist was imposed, and before it was blacklisted, someone indicated that something was going to happen to the Bahamas. We couldn't understand why. We'd sent them the letter before the deadline. They said it wasn't signed by the correct person, so we sent a letter signed by the correct person, being the minister. On the day of the deadline, it got there before their close of business. So why did they blacklist us? Turns out we didn't use their wording in the letter of commitment. That is as much of an explanation as we ever got. So that is the intent of the advice: is comply, get out of their sights, get out of their scopes, and don't allow yourself, to the extent that you can prevent it, to be blacklisted. With regard to the issue, several substantive issues raised all around Grand Bahama, so it's not going to take much more time. I want to say that the question of preferential tax rates set out in the IBC legislation and in other legislation like exempted partnerships and ICONs, Investment Condominiums Act, etc. All of these exemptions that are referred to in the preferential exemptions, removal of preferential exemptions bill. These exemptions all deal with taxes, and in two places our Constitution, on a quick look through it, in Articles 26(4)(a), dealing with non-discriminatory behavior, and Articles 27(2), dealing with the deprivation of property, both specifically exempt laws that may be alleged to be discriminatory related to taxation. And that's in relation to tax. You could say, oh, I'm being discriminatorily whatever. That is exempted in the Constitution of the Bahamas. And similarly, the deprivation of property provision in the Constitution, there's a specific carve-out. So you can't come and say, you have deprived me of my property being my tax exemptions. That is the advice. That is our view. Okay, so we will see. I will say this much. Yeah, no problem. No problem, it's not a problem. It's not a problem even for the Europeans, because the Europeans have made it clear on this question of the transition period to comply, when our starting position, quite rightly and properly, was that the laws on our books grant exemptions, and it wouldn't be right to remove them. And that was essentially our position. This is what our law says, and we feel our law should be followed and respected. And their view was that, together with the Forum on Harmful Tax Practices, which is the OECD body that works closely with the Europeans on this BEP situation, that the most that they are prepared to extend is 3 years transition on the tax issue of the tax-exempt status of IBCs, etc., from stamp duty, etc. So we don't care that your law said 20 years. The only time you get. It is a legal issue, and I wasn't couching it as moral. I'm saying that's the law. We said that's the law. We can't, just abrogate that. They said, no, well, you got 3 years. That's the position. But no, I want to make one last point about it. One last point, and then I'll yield on this. It's just a very small point. They did concede that an exception to their hard and fast rule would be that if it was deemed unconstitutional, then they would have to accept the verdict of a court. And the last thing I have to say is that this underpins a lot of their approach. They love to have ministers come, but they really don't want to hear ministers state policy or law to them, even attorneys general. They say, let the court tell you. If the court says that, we'll accept it. If you say that, we're not going to accept it. I now yield to you.
Yes, sorry. The more particular point I was making is, as I wasn't placing it so high on constitutional grounds, as I understood the administrative law principles, that if someone has something, that you can't take it away from them. That's what I thought the principle was, established as a legal principle in administrative law.
I don't accept that. I don't accept that interpretation of of administrative law, and I think that administrative law could not possibly be so hidebound on issues such as this. And nor can I see that an administrative principle could countenance it's, in a sense, usurpation of the constitutional framework that governs these matters. There is a specific provision in the Constitution on these matters. Okay, and so I don't see how concepts such as legitimate expectation can trump the legislature and the Constitution, not on a matter to do with the public revenue. There are a whole scope of other areas where administrative law and the extent to which administrative law deals with issues of tax, it's merely in question in terms of the procedure involved. Okay, that's my view.
So, the logical outturn of your argument would be that if a government gives a concession to someone, that at any point the government can take that concession away, because that would
Not capriciously,
Well,
not capriciously,
well, precisely.
but things have changed. It is not a capricious act of the government. No government can act capriciously in administrative law. And if a government is found to have acted capriciously, there will be appropriate public law remedies. Capriciously, irrationally, vindictively, these all will attract public law remedies, but not necessarily remedies that would prevent the law from being applied. It may condition how it's applied, public law. Okay, okay. But that is an argument for the, I understand your point, but I state absolutely and positively that the government is not acting vindictively, the government is not acting capriciously, the government is not acting irrationally. And it is not acting under duress. It gave a commitment. The government gave a commitment, starting with the CRS, given the commitment given by your government, when you were at the table, around that table, to engage with the Europeans on all their tax matters. Maybe not that day, but you were around the table since your chair was waiting for you to come and sit there, and someone would have been acting on your behalf in your temporary absence. Yes. Okay. So, let me just say that, yes, we all feel the burden of the changes that are required, but we are resolute in this regard, that we are doing the very best that we can in the very trying circumstances that confront us to do as much as we can to preserve the viability and integrity of the financial services sector. It will be a challenge, but we can first survive, then compete, and then succeed. We are, it is the Bahamas. We know how to do a job, and we know how to do it well. So on these words, Madam President, I move that the question now be put. Oh, sorry, ma'am. Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry, I see that there's some document circulating on social media on a slightly different thing, saying that the FNM government is planning to take away pensions for civil service beginning next year. There's absolutely no such plan, no such intention. Okay, so we're not planning to deprive anybody of that to which they are entitled. Okay, what has often been said, but it has not even yet been decided by this government, but has been said in several governments, is that for new persons coming on, but we'd have to pass a law to do this, for new persons coming on into the public service, that just as happens with politicians, the pension should be a contributory pension. Right now, I'm telling you, I'm coming to that now. From the inception of the public service, it's wholly paid by the government. But this is only parlor time chit chat. There's no decision by the government to even do that. Well, you know that it's a consideration that has to be looked at. You all looked at it, etc. Yes, the RFP is for. You want advice? Well, so why? What? Can we not get advice? Okay. Yeah. Anyway, the intention is not to deprive anybody of any vested right or any right that presently affects anybody who is in the public service. We know that when you come in and you have a guaranteed right, they cannot be changed for an individual. For an individual. No. But going forward, no. This is about individuals in the public service. And a specific contract with individuals. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. It has been moved and seconded that a bill for an act to provide for substantial economic presence and annual reporting of a commercial entity carrying on relevant activities in the Bahamas and for connected purposes be read a second time and committed. As many as are in favor will say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Order that the bill be read a second time and committed.
Bill for an act to provide for substantial economic presence and annual reporting of the commercial entity carrying on relevant activities in the Bahamas and for the reading in my copy.
Okay, I have these numbered, Carl. Numbered. I have these numbered. Yeah. Further second reading and committal of bills.
Madam President, I beg leave to move for the second reading and committal of a bill for an act to remove exemptions for a certain category of companies or entities incorporated in the Bahamas. If I may obtain a seconder.
Madam President, I rise to second.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill for an act to remove exemptions for a certain category of companies or entities incorporated in the Bahamas be read a second time and committed. As many as are in favor will say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Ordered that the bill be read a second time and committed.
Bill for an act to remove exemptions for a certain category of companies or entities incorporated in the Bahamas.
Further second reading and committal of bills.
Madam President, I beg leave to move for the second reading of a bill for an act to provide for a register of beneficial ownership, if I may obtain a seconder. Second reading and committal.
Madam President, I rise to second.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill for an act to provide for a register of beneficial ownership be read a second time and committed. As many as are in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Order that the bill be read a second time and committed.
Bill for an act to provide for a register of beneficial ownership.
Further second reading and committal of bills.
Madam President, I beg leave to move for the second reading and committal of a bill for an act to amend the Penal Code Act to provide for the offense of intent to defraud the government. If I may obtain a seconder.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill for an act to amend the Penal Code Act to provide for the offense of intent to defraud the government be read a second time and committed. As many as are in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Order that the bill be read a second time and committed.
Bill for an act to amend the Penal Code Act to provide for the offense of intent to defraud the government.
Further second reading and committal of bills.
Madam President, I beg leave to move for the second reading and committal of a bill for an act to provide for the regulation of non-profit organizations and for connected purposes. If I may obtain a seconder.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill for an act to provide for the regulation of non-profit organizations and for connected purposes be read a second time and committed. As many as are in favor will say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Order that the bill be read a second time and committed.
A bill for an act derived from the regulation of non-profit organizations and for connected purposes.
For the second reading and committal of bills.
There are no further
Are we doing that?
this was already committed though, wasn't it? Value-added tax amendment act was already committed, so it's, yes. It's already in committee.
It's in committee?
It's in
Okay.
committee, yes.
Right.
Okay, there are no further second readings. Madam President, I now beg leave to move that the Senate now resolve itself into a committee of the whole with the Madam Vice President in the seat as chairman. If I may obtain a seconder.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the Senate resolve itself into the committee of the whole with the Vice President in the chair. As many as are in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The Senate will now resolve itself into the committee of the whole with the Vice President in the chair.
David? I just have We'll start with the VAT amendment bill. Let's get this out of the way because the VAT amendment bill, we put this in, yeah, when you say, you do 200 when you share the benefit on.
Committee of the whole?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Now, we'll first go in the order which they entered the committee. So we have in the committee already, since last week, the Value-Added Tax Amendment Bill number 2 of 2018. And so I beg leave to move that the long title of this bill be agreed.
Is there a second?
Is there a seconder? Thank you.
It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many as in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The long title of the bill is agreed.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I now beg leave to move that the short title, commencement and duration of the bill in Section 1 be agreed.
Is there a second?
I second.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The short title of the bill is agreed.
Madam Chair, I beg leave to move that Section 2 of the bill be agreed.
Is there a second?
I second.
It has been moved and seconded that Section 2 of the bill be agreed. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Section 2 of the bill is agreed.
Excellent. Madam Chair, I beg leave to move that the bill in its entirety be agreed.
I second.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The bill has been agreed in its entirety.
Okay. May I ask members, you're making an amendment to the substance bill? You're making proposed amendment to the substance bill? Commercial entities substance requirement bill? And which clause? Clause 8. Okay. Madam Chair? Yeah. Oh yeah, okay. I beg leave to move. Let me just say where we are. The government has proposed these amendments on 3 pages and a bit. Don't forget that bit there, please. Just rolled over to the bill. Bill has been something of a work in progress, and as I said, in discussion, and we had to hammer some of these terms out between last Wednesday and today, and we are settled now on that, and this is what we intend to pass. So these amendments will be moved by Senator Minister Thompson. I understand that the opposition have some amendments to this or other bills that they would wish to move, but the government's view is set, and so we will not be supporting the opposition amendments at this time. Well, no, I know. From the discussions you and I have had, I've indicated to you that particularly on the question of passive holding companies, where there was some attention in the an opposition amendment, that we felt that the changes made in our amendment here more than adequately protect passive holding companies from undue scrutiny and undue and burdensome requirements. And that, you know, and I pointed out to you the changes that we made. So I look forward to having a harmonious dialogue, but we think we've done the best we can. On that note, I beg leave to move that the long title of a bill for an act to provide for substantial economic presence and annual reporting of a commercial entity carrying on relevant activities in the Bahamas and for connected purposes be agreed, the long title.
Seconded, please.
I second.
It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Madam,
Hold on.
Madam Chair, I wish to move a amendment to the long title. Delete the words "in the Bahamas."
If you maintain a second.
If
May
I
we
can
have
get
a
a
second,
second.
please?
Second.
Yes.
It has been moved and seconded that in the long title of the bill, the words "in the Bahamas"
Yes.
be
Yes.
removed.
Yeah, just to explain, the view advance is that relevant activities are relevant no matter where they occur. And if we said in the Bahamas, we'd be limited to only things done in the Bahamas when all of these things are offshore, which is a legitimate point. And so we seek to accommodate it. So I would ask members present to vote in favor of this amendment. No. Please go.
It has been moved and seconded that in the long title of the bill, an amendment be made that words "in the Bahamas" be removed.
Yes.
Although, as many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The amendment has been approved as read.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I now beg leave to move for that the short title and commencement of the bill be agreed.
I second.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye. Those opposed, nay.
Yes.
The ayes have it. The short title has been agreed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I now beg leave to move that Clause 2 of the bill be agreed.
I second.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title, that a second amendment of the bill be Clause 2 of the bill be agreed. As many as are in
Madam
favor.
Chair, I wish to move a amendment to Clause 2 in the definition of included entity. A, in paragraph A, insert the word and after the semicolon. B, in paragraph B, delete the word and C, delete paragraph C. If I may obtain a second.
Madam Chair, I rise to second.
It has been moved and seconded that in paragraph A,
As moved. Yeah, can I explain this?
okay,
Yeah, huh?
the amendment to Clause 2
Yeah.
as read
As read.
be agreed.
As many?
As many as are in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The amendment to Clause 2 has been agreed.
Okay. Right, okay. No, the question is, you know, this base erosion of profit shifting. And so whether an entity makes money or generates revenue from an activity is not the issue. It's just whether it conducts the relevant activity. Because it's in the conduct of the relevant activity that profits can be shifted around. And so you're saying generating revenue, it may not have any revenue because it's been shifted. And so that was why that was deleted. Okay, Madam President, I now beg leave to move that Clause 3 of the bill be agreed.
I second.
It has been moved and seconded that amendment to Clause 3,
No,
that Clause 3 be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The amendment to Clause 3 has been agreed.
Madam President, I beg leave to move that Clause 4 of the bill be agreed.
I second.
It has been moved and seconded that the amendment, that the Clause 4 be agreed. As many as are
Madam
in
Chair,
favor.
I wish to move an amendment to Clause 4. Delete the words "in or from within the Bahamas" wherever they appear. If I may obtain a second.
Madam Chair, rise a second.
It has been moved and seconded that in Clause 4, an amendment be made
As read.
as read. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The amendment as read has been agreed.
Thank you. Madam Chairman, I beg leave to move the Clause 5 of the bill be agreed.
I second.
Most of the amendments right there, myself clause.
Yeah. Mine is dealing with the numbers in the foreign
Sorry. It has been moved and seconded that an amendment to
That Clause 5
Clause 5 be agreed.
as many.
As many as are in
Madam Chair, there is I wish to move an amendment to Clause 5. A, in subsection 1, delete the words "in the Bahamas" where they occur the first time. B, delete subclause 4H and substitute the following. H, intellectual property asset activities. 1, patent and similar intellectual property assets, research and development. 2, intangible intellectual property assets such as brand, trademark, and customer data, marketing, branding, and distribution. And if I may obtain a second.
Madam Chair, rise a second.
It has been moved and seconded that the amendments to Clause 5 as read be agreed. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The amendments in Clause 5 are agreed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I beg leave to move that Clauses 6 and 7 of the bill be agreed.
Madam Chair, I rise a second.
It has been moved and seconded that Clause 6 to the bill be agreed. 6 and 7 be agreed. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Clause 6 and 7 are agreed.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. I beg leave to move that Clause 8 of the bill be agreed. We'll move on the opposition suggested amendment. I can say vote against, but...
Second. Seconder, please.
Second. I second.
Not at all. Yeah, that's right. That's what you were saying.
Can I have a seconder, please?
Madam, I rise
I
a
move
second.
Section 8. Yes, thank you. Okay.
It has been moved and seconded that Clause 8 be agreed.
That's many.
As many.
That's it.
Madam Chair, we wanted to offer this suggested amendment to the bill. In Clause, delete the existing Clause 8.1 and replace with the following. A passive holding entity shall comply with all other applicable laws and regulations of the Bahamas, but this act shall not apply to it. If I may have a seconder. Second.
It has been moved and seconded that in Clause an amendment be made to Clause 8. As many as are in favor, say amendment as read. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay.
Nay.
The ayes have it.
The nays of it.
The nays have it. The clause is not agreed. The amendment is not agreed.
That's a good one, Brad.
Madam Chair, I wish to move an amendment to Clause
Yeah, here we go. Sorry.
to Clause 8 of the bill. Delete subclauses 2 and 3 and substitute the following. Sub 2, subject to subsection 3, A passive holding entity shall not be required to comply with the substance requirements of this Act, save that strategic decisions of the passive holding entity shall be made in the Bahamas by persons with the necessary knowledge and expertise to make such decisions. Sub 3, where a passive holding company engages in any relevant activity, that company shall be required to satisfy substance requirements. Subclause 4, for the purposes of this Act, equity participation entity means a company which only holds equity participations and earns only dividends and capital gains or incidental income. And passive holding entity means an entity which does not by itself or by any of its subsidiaries conduct any relevant activity and includes a collective investment entity or equity participation entity. If I may obtain a second.
Madam Chair, I rise to second.
I just, quickly before we vote, these bills we think adequately address the concerns, and they do something else, these changes. They specifically define passive holding entity to capture all of our, what do you call it, investment, collective investment entities, okay, and equity participation entities that are a lot like mutual funds and everything else. So what we're doing is this is directly targeted to defend a critical area within the offshore financial sector, and it does so with specificity. So it's clear what is being dealt with.
It has been moved and seconded that the amendments be made to Clause 8 of the bill as read. All those, as many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The amendments to Clause 8 are agreed.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. I now move that Clause 9 of the bill be agreed.
I rise to second.
Thank you.
It has been moved and seconded that Clause 9 of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes.
Yes, yes. Go on.
The ayes have it. The Clause 9 of the bill is agreed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I beg leave to move that Clause 10 of the bill be agreed.
I rise to second.
It has been moved and seconded that Clause 10 of the bill be agreed. As many.
Madam Chair, I wish to move an amendment to Clause 10. A, delete subclauses 2 and subclause 3 and substitute the following. Subclause 2, a regulated included entity shall report on its compliance with this Act to the authority within 9 months of its fiscal year end in the manner set out in Form B of the first schedule. Subclause 3, a passive holding entity shall report on its compliance with this Act to the authority within 9 months of its fiscal year end in the manner set out in Form C of the first schedule. B, in subclause 4, 1, insert immediately after the word entity the words which is not a passive holding entity, and 2, delete the words Form E and substitute the words Form C. If I may obtain a second.
It has been moved and seconded that the amendments to Clause 10 be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye. Those opposed, nay. The amendments to Clause 10 are agreed.
Thank you, Madam President. I now beg leave to move that Clause 11 of the bill be agreed.
I rise to second.
It has been moved and seconded that Clause 10 of the bill... 11 be agreed. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Clause 11 of the bill has been agreed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I beg leave to move now to move that Clause 12 of the bill be agreed. If I may obtain a second.
Madam President, I rise to second.
It has been moved and seconded that Clause 12 of the bill be agreed. As many.
Madam Chair, I wish to move an amendment to Clause 12. In subclause 2, delete the words Form B, C, or D, and substitute the words Form B or C. If I may obtain a second.
That's because we're getting rid of Form D.
It has been moved and seconded that the amendments to Clause 12 as read be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The amendments as read are agreed.
Yeah, I know. Thank you, Madam Chair. I beg leave now to move that clauses 13 through 28 be agreed.
Madam Chair, I rise to
13 through
second.
28.
It has been moved and seconded that clauses 13 through 28 be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Clause 13 through 28 are agreed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I now beg leave to move that the first schedule be agreed. If I may obtain a seconder. That's what you have to move.
Madam President, I second.
It has been moved and seconded that the first schedule of the bill be agreed. As many.
Madam Chair, I wish to move an amendment to the first schedule. A, delete the reference to Clause 10A, appearing immediately under the schedule heading, and substitute the reference to Clause 10. B, in Form B, 1, insert immediately after the words included entities, appearing under Form B, the words unregulated included entities. 2, insert immediately under the row beginning type the following new row, which reads, please indicate whether included entity or regulated included entity. In the other line, included entity, and in the other line, regulated included entity. 3, delete the word included wherever it appears after the row inserted in paragraph 2 above. C, delete 1, Form D in its entirety, and 2, Form E in its entirety. If I may obtain a second.
It has been.
Yeah, sorry. May I just explain? This is a question that has to do with what they call regulated included entities. And these would be particularly investment funds and collective investment funds, mutual funds, etc. And there's a special, in a sense, regime created for them. They are presumed to have complied with substance. And so we then amalgamated some forms now because we created this special structure really over the last 2 weeks, this special regime. And that really explains the need to change forms as we push them together, particularly on behalf of these regulated included entities. These are included entities. That means entities not owned by Bahamians that are conducting relevant activities, but which are regulated either under the Investment Funds Act, the Securities Commission Act, etc., the Securities Industries Act. And so these are regulated by other acts of the Bahamian Parliament. And so they only have to comply with the laws that govern their regulation and not substance directly. Thank you.
It has been moved and seconded that the amendments as read, amendments to the first schedule be agreed as read. All those, as many as are in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The amendments to the first schedule are agreed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I now beg leave to move that the second schedule to the bill be agreed. This is the list of reportable jurisdictions that we are prepared to settle on. Essentially, it is the OECD membership.
Madam Chair, I rise to second.
It has been moved and seconded that the second schedule as read be agreed. As many as are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The second schedule as presented is agreed.
you, Madam Chair. I now beg leave to move that the third schedule to the bill be agreed.
I rise to second.
It has been moved and seconded that the third schedule to the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The third schedule to the bill is agreed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I now beg leave to move that the bill in its entirety be agreed.
Madam Chair,
As amended. As amended, yes.
Madam Chair, I rise to second.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety as amended be agreed. As many as are in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The bill in its entirety with amendments are agreed.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Further, I'll just move it. Madam Chair, we now move on to the Register of Beneficial Ownership Bill. And I beg leave to move that the long title of a bill for an act to provide for a register of beneficial ownership be agreed.
I rise to second.
Okay. 12. Now these would be typos captured on the under the provisions on mail slips. So I wouldn't want to touch them because that cost. Yeah. Thank you. And I'm not aware of it, but okay. So it's carried down. Fine. These will be captured on.
It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill, which one are we doing? Be agreed?
Register of the beneficial ownership.
Okay. That the long title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The long title of the bill is agreed.
Thank you, Madam
Madam Chair, I beg leave to move that clause 2 of the bill be agreed. If I may obtain a seconder.
You don't want to do a short
Right.
I beg leave to move, Madam Chair, that the short title of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The short title of the bill is agreed.
Mayor title, mayor slip. I think it's going to be mayor slip issue. I mean, I'll point out to them. That'll be captured. Madam President, Madam Chair, I beg leave to move that clause 2 of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that clause 2 of the bill be agreed. As many.
Madam Chair, I wish to move an amendment to clause 2. A, delete the definition of licensee and substitute the following. Licensee includes a licensee or registrant under A, the Bank and Trust Companies Regulation Act, Chapter 316, B, the Investment Funds Act, Chapter 369A, C, the Securities Industry Act, 2011, number 10 of 2011, D, the Insurance Act, Chapter 347, E, the External Insurance Act, Chapter 348, F, the Financial and Corporate Service Providers Act, Chapter 363, and shall provide its affiliates and wholly owned subsidiaries. And B, delete the definition of securities exchange and substitute the following. Securities exchange means A, the Bahamas International Securities Exchange, or B, any other regulated securities exchange recognized pursuant to the Securities Industry Act 2011, number 10 of 2011. C, insert the following definition in the appropriate alphabetical order. Affiliate, in relation to a licensee, means a legal entity or foreign regulated person that is under common control, which with such licensee and hence is considered to be a member of the same group of companies. If I may obtain a second.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that in clause 2, was that clause?
Yes, clause 2.
Right, yeah. Clause 2 of the bill with the amendment as read be agreed. As many as are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay.
Okay.
The ayes have it. The amendments to clause 2 are agreed.
Let me see. Clause 8, 9. Okay. Where's the next one? Okay. Madam Chair, I beg leave to move that clauses 3 and 4 of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that clauses 3 and 4 of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Clauses 3 and 4 are agreed.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I beg leave to move that clause 5 of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that clause 5 of the bill be agreed. As many.
Madam Chair, I wish to move the following amendment to clause 5. Delete subclauses 5(1)(a) and (b) and substitute the following. A, in the case of a legal person other than a legal entity whose securities are listed on a securities exchange, a natural person who ultimately owns or controls, whether directly or indirectly, 10 or more % of the shares or voting rights of the legal entity. B, in the case of a legal person, a natural person who otherwise exercises control over the management of the legal person other than solely in the capacity of a director, advisor, or professional manager. If I may obtain a second.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that clause 5 of the bill with amendments be agreed. As many as are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Clause 5 of the bill is agreed with amendments.
Thank you. I beg leave, Madam Chair, to move that clause 6 of the bill be agreed.
I rise to second.
It has been moved and seconded that clause 6 of the bill be agreed. As many.
Madam Chair, I wish to move the amendment, following amendment to clause 6. In the chapeau, delete the words legal entity and substitute the words legal person, its affiliates, or wholly owned subsidiaries. If I may obtain a second.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that clause 6 of the bill with amendments as read be agreed. As many as are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Clause 6 with amendments as read are agreed.
Yeah. Madam Chair, I beg leave to move that clause 7 of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that clause 7 of the bill be agreed. As many.
Madam Chair, I wish to move the following amendment to clause 7. Delete clause 7 and substitute as follows. Sub 1, for the purposes of this act, an exempt person is a person who meets one or more of the following conditions. A legal entity, the securities of which are listed on a regulated securities exchange. B, a licensee as defined under Section 2 of this act. C, a legal entity which is a wholly owned subsidiary of a legal entity that falls within paragraph B, or D, any other legal entity that the minister may exempt by regulations. 2, the provisions of section 8(1) and 2 and 9(2)(b) and C shall not apply to an exempt person. If I may obtain a second.
I second.
It has been moved and seconded that clause 7 of the bill with amendments as read be agreed. As many as are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Clause 7 of the bill with amendments as read is agreed.
Madam Chair, I beg leave to move that clause 8 of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that clause 8 of the bill be agreed. As many.
Madam Chair, I wish to move the following amendment to clause 8. Delete subclause 1 and substitute the following. 1. A legal entity shall within 15 days of identifying any person as a beneficial owner or a registrable legal entity of that legal entity notify its registered agent or the Registrar General of those persons identified as beneficial owners and registrable legal entities. If I may obtain a second.
I second, Madam Chairman.
It has been moved and seconded that clause 8 of the bill with the amendments as read be agreed. As many as are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Clause 8 of the bill with amendments is agreed.
Okay, which clause now? Is it okay? We have to deal with this. Okay, I would now move that clause 9 of the bill be agreed. If I may obtain a seconder.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that clause 9 of the bill be agreed. As many.
Madam Chair, I wish to move the following amendment to clause 9. Clause 9, 1B, insert the word with after the words in accordance. In accordance.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that clause 9 of the bill with amendments as read be agreed. As many as are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Clause 9 with amendments is agreed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I beg leave to move that clauses 10 and 11 be agreed.
Seconded.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that clause 10 and 11 of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Clauses 10 and 11 are agreed.
Thank you. Okay, there's just one other amendment of a typo that was caught, but it has to be captured here. If I may just make a change here. No, we finish right now. Okay? Madam, as I said, Madam Chair, I now move that clause 12 of the bill be agreed.
I rise to second.
It has been moved and seconded that the clause 12 of the bill be agreed. As many.
Madam Chair, I wish to move the following amendment to clause 12.
A.
Clause 12, A. Oh, sorry, clause 12.
A. Yeah.
Renumber subclause 5 as subclause 6. The second time that it appears in the section, and consequently, renumber all following subsections.
Subclauses. Say something.
Subclauses.
Clauses. Okay, now B.
And B, in the renumbered clause,
Subclause.
or in the renumbered subclause 7, renumber the numerical 5 to 6. If I may obtain a second.
Madam Chair, I rise to second.
It has been moved and seconded that Clause 12, with the amendments as read, be agrees. Excuse me. Be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Clause 12 with amendments is agreed.
Madam Chair, I beg leave to move that clauses 13 through 18 of the bill be agreed. 18? 13 through 17 be agreed. If I may obtain a seconder.
I rise to second.
It has been moved and seconded that Clause 13 through 17 be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Clause 13 through 17 are agreed.
Okay. Madam Chair, I beg leave to move the clause 18 of the bill be agreed. I understand the opposition has an amendment proposed.
Seconded, please.
Second. Who seconded?
Madam Chair, I rise to second.
It has been moved and seconded that Clause 18 of the bill be agreed. As many?
Yes, Madam Chair. I want to offer this, from this side, the following. Delete Clause 18 of the bill and replace with a new Clause 18 as follows. For the avoidance of doubt, this act shall not apply to any entity or registered agent empowered under any other law, but shall apply only to new entities or registered agents so authorized after the commencement of this act.
Madam President, I appreciate the legal joust. Let me say that to accept that amendment would be to subvert the entire intention of this bill, as it would only apply to entities going forward, essentially, and registered agents dealing with entities going forward. And that would be to subvert the intention of the legislation. And so, I now move the question without put.
Makes the point, establishes the point we were making in the debate, is that there's a disadvantage. Well, we anticipate there'll be legal jousting almost immediately over this point because people have pre-existing rights which are in fact being taken away.
What, to the beneficial ownership information? Those rights are not being taken away. The same duties that the law is requiring are duties that are already required by other laws and practice and guidance notes under the FTRA, the Financial Transactions Reporting Act. The requirement is for all and the Financial and Corporate Services Providers Act, the requirement is for all attorneys as DNFBPs or attorneys practicing as licensed financial and corporate services providers, and all financial institutions who incorporate or in any way hold the assets of these entities that are reportable entities such as IBCs and companies to maintain beneficial ownership information. It's called KYC and due diligence. So there is no change because this is we do need it. We do need it. We do need it. This is about making their databases accessible to the software system, the backbone of the system that will have to be implemented. And that is what it's about. It's about making their software databases accessible to law enforcement and only proper inquiries. Thank you.
As many as are in favor of
the amendment.
Clause 18, the amendment.
Moved.
As many as are in favor of the amendment as presented, say aye.
Aye. You're not aye. You're not an aye. Yeah, they get what? Well, we're not having a division. We don't have a division. We're not having a division. We don't have a division.
Those,
yeah.
those against the amendment, nay.
Nay. come, give me one, man, give me one.
The amendment fails.
Almost, yeah, almost, yeah. Yes, okay, sorry. Madam Chair, thank you very much. So happy to have gotten through that heavy work. I now move that the schedule to the bill be now agreed.
I rise to second.
It has been moved and seconded that the schedule to the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The schedule to the bill is agreed.
Madam Chair, I now beg leave to move that the bill in its entirety be agreed. If I may obtain it as amended. If I may obtain a seconder.
I rise to second, Madam President.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety as amended be agreed. As many as are in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The bill in its entirety with amendments is agreed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I now beg leave to move that the long title of a bill for an act to remove exemptions for a certain category of companies or entities incorporated in the Bahamas in the short time be agreed.
Long title.
The removal of preferential exemptions, yes.
I rise to second.
Okay.
We're doing the long title first.
I just,
right?
I move the long title be agreed, yes.
It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The long title of the bill is agreed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I beg leave to move that the short title and commencement of the bill be agreed.
I second.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The short title of the bill is agreed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I beg leave to move that the clause 2 of the bill be agreed.
Second.
Clause 3, right? Yes. Okay.
It has been moved and seconded that clause 2 of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The clause 2 of the bill is agreed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I beg leave to move the clause 3 of the bill be agreed. If I may obtain a seconder.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the clause 3 of the bill be agreed. As many.
We'd like to offer the following amendment to Clause 3 of the bill. Amend the bill by deleting Clause 3(2) and what follows, and replace with a new subclause 2 as follows. This act shall only apply to new entities registered pursuant to the International Business Companies Act, Exempted Limited Partnership Act, Investment Condominium Act, and Executive Entities Act after the coming into force of this act. Second. I so.
As it has been moved and seconded that in clause 3 the amendment is as read. As many as are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay.
Nay.
The nays have it.
One of the 4
The amendment fails.
woke up.
So you have selective hearing, man.
Okay.
Yes, okay. No, I don't know who abstained. Madam Chair, I now beg leave to move that clauses 3 to 5 of the bill be accepted. Agreed. Sorry.
I rise to second.
It has been moved and seconded that clause 3, 4, and 5 of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Clauses 3 through 5 are agreed.
Madam Chair, I beg leave to move that the first schedule to the bill be agreed.
I rise to second.
It has been moved and seconded that the first schedule to the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The first schedule of the bill is agreed.
Madam Chair, I beg leave to move that the second schedule be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that the second schedule of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The second schedule of the bill is agreed.
Madam Chair, I beg leave to move that the bill in its entirety be agreed.
I rise to second.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. As many as are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The bill is agreed in its entirety.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I now beg leave to move that the long title of a bill for an act to amend the penal code to provide for the offense of intent to defraud the government be agreed.
Rise a second.
It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. Those, as many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The long title of the bill is agreed.
Madam Chair, I beg leave to move that the short title of the bill be agreed.
Rise a second.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Sure. Madam Chair, we have this amendment to offer amend Clause 2 of the bill by a new subclause to subclause C3 to read as follows. A charge under this section may not be brought without the fiat of the Attorney General and shall not be brought unless the Attorney General is satisfied and so certifies in writing that all reasonable efforts have been made to exhaust the recovery of revenue lost to the government.
It has been moved and seconded that an amendment be made as read to Clause 2. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Nay.
Those opposed?
Nay.
The nays have it. The amendment is defeated.
The transfer them powers from the AG sitting. Madam Chair, the amendment having been defeated, I now move that the bill in its entirety be agreed.
I rise a second.
It has been moved and seconded that the
Bill in its entirety.
in its entirety be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The bill is agreed in its entirety.
Thank you. Madam Chairman, just to remind you and the public, we gave our commitment that we would delay and defer passage of the non-profit bill through committee until this time next week, Thursday next week. That is the date that we will adjourn the Senate to. And at that time, we will seek to have the benefits of further discussions. And so on that note, I now move that Madam Speaker do... Madam President, this is about the third time I call him Madam Speaker.
2021.
Madam President, do now retake her chair.
It has been moved and
I second.
seconded that the President... You did second, eh? Oh. That the President do now take the chair. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The President will resume the chair. Somebody's getting it?
You sound like Kavala. Baby Prophecy 101.
Somebody's getting it. I have to read each one of these bills to say what they mean. All the bills.
Oh, Lord.
Madam President, I beg to report that the Committee of the Whole has gone through 4 bills, several amendments being in all of them. Some having in 3 of the 4 bills. Several of the bills. And others with having made amendments of 2 of the bills and has agreed with all of them being passed in their entirety. As amended.
I hope I can repeat what he said.
You will summarize.
Honorable Senators, the Vice President and Chairman of the Committee of the Whole has reported that several bills have been passed through committee with amendments to 2 of those bills. Third reading and passing.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. I now beg leave to move for the third reading and passage of the Commercial Entities Substance Requirement Bill 2018, if I may obtain a second.
Madam President, I rise to second.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill for an act to provide for substantial economic presence and annual reporting of a commercial entity carrying on relevant activities in the Bahamas and for connected purposes be read a third time and passed. As many as are in favor will say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Order that the bill be read a third time and passed.
That's called an abstention. That's an abstention, yes.
Order that this bill do now pass and the title thereof declared to be Commercial Entities Substance Requirements Act 2018. Further third reading and passing.
Madam President, may it please you, I beg leave to move for the third reading and passage of a bill for an act to provide for a register of beneficial ownership, if I may obtain a seconder.
Rise to second.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill for an act to provide for a register of beneficial ownership be read a third time and passed. As many as are in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Order that the bill be read a third time and passed. Further third reading and passing.
You know what the Bible say? The Bible say, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Anything else comes from the evil one. Okay.
Further third reading and passing of bills.
Thank you, Madam President. Any quote scripture? Sorry about that. Of course, neither of us fit the last part of that sentence. Madam President, I beg leave to move for the third reading and passage of a bill for an act to remove exemptions for a certain category of companies or entities incorporated in the Bahamas. May obtain a seconder.
Second. It has been moved and seconded that a bill for an act to remove exemptions for a certain category of companies or entities incorporated in the Bahamas be read a third time and passed. As many as are in favor will say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Order that the bill be read a third time and passed. Order that this bill do now pass and the title thereof declared to be Removal of Preferential Exemption Act 2018. Further third reading and passing of bills.
Thank you, Madam President. I beg leave to move for the third reading and passage for a bill for an act to amend the Penal Code Act to provide for the offense of intent to defraud the government, if I may obtain a second.
I rise to second.
Chairs will pull back.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill for an act to amend the Penal Code Act to provide for the offense of intent to defraud the government be read a third time and passed. As many as are in favor will say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Order that the bill be read a third time and passed. Penal Code. Order that this bill do now pass and the title thereof declared to be Penal Code Amendment Act 2018. Further third reading and passing of bills.
Thank you, Madam President. I beg leave to move for the third reading and passage of a bill for an act to amend the Value-Added Tax Act, if I may obtain a seconder.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill for an act to amend the Value-Added Tax Act be read a third time and passed. As many as are in favor will say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Order that the bill be read a third time and passed.
A bill for an act to amend the Value-Added Tax Act.
Order that this bill do now pass and the title thereof be declared to be Value-Added Tax Amendment Number 2 Act 2018. For the third reading and passing of bills.
Madam President, there are no further third readings and passage of bills at this point. Thank you.
Consideration of House amendments,
None.
resolutions, discharge of select committees, notices for future meetings.
Madam Chair, Madam President, I beg leave to, give notice that all, and request that all matters in the name of the government be preserved on the agenda, and give notice that the Senate will meet, we plan to meet next Thursday. That will be the 17th. Next Thursday. No, man. Today is the 10th. Oh, yeah, Monday. Yeah. Sorry. No, Thursday this week. The House is meeting, Thursday this week. That'll be the 13th, yes. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is the 13th. Yes, the House is meeting on Wednesday, and we will meet to table whatever it is, and we will deal with the nonprofit organization bill on Thursday. And then, if necessary, we will adjourn until Monday to pass whatever the House has passed, or we can come back on Friday.
I'm sorry. I thought you said that this note that you had stood this matter down the nonprofits for 7
For 1 week, 7 days.
So isn't that Monday?
Well, then we'll do that on Monday then.
Today is,
Yeah, we'll do that.
Today is Monday? Or?
Yeah.
So that should be, that's what I anticipated it would be next Monday.
Then it'll be next Monday then.
Right.
However, we have to meet on Thursday the 13th to deal with what the House passes. I would like... Yeah, those are very minor and very quick bills. One is a regulation and one is a bill. It's very small. And there may be some other small ones if we can get the consent. We'll see where we are. But so it shouldn't be difficult for us to agree to go through all three stages on Thursday of these minor, small bills. I'm just asking. Well, okay, I mean, hey, listen, as often as it takes, as long as it takes to move the agenda and to ensure that everything that we intend to have passed between now and Christmas is done, if I have to ask everybody to meet on Christmas, the day before Christmas Eve, not Christmas Day, the day before, I mean, it'll have to be that way, just as it was with the old budget debates in the old days, but we hope we don't have to come to that. And we hope if we come, we don't have to meet all day.
You'll have to explain to your wife, not me. Why we're working on Christmas Eve.
At least do the budgets.
While the turkey is in the...
Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Fred Mitchell.
Yes, I was just caught unawares by the request, and I usually don't like to respond without having thought about it, so that's the only hesitation I have, nothing in principle. I'd like to renew the notices in standing in the name of the opposition. Thank you.
Thank you. Orders for the clerk. I order the clerk to take the bills passed today to the Speaker and acquaint him that the Senate has consented to the same with amendments to 2 of the bills. Adjournment.
Madam President, I beg leave to move that the Senate, on its rising, be adjourned to Thursday, 13th day of December, Anno Domini 2018, at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. Thank you. If I may take a second.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the business of the Senate on its rising be adjourned to Thursday, December 13th at 10 a.m. All those in favor would say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The Senate stands adjourned on its rising.
Madam Chair, Madam President, I now beg leave to move that the Senate be now adjourned.